The story begins with a boy named Ryuka who didn't like much in life, especially not the leader of their group. The only thing that made him happy was music. One day he was asked to play the horns to signal the soldiers to start marching, even though he didn't want to. After the battle, the soldiers started collecting the heads of their enemies as prizes. In the chaos, Ryuka found a trumpet covered in blood. Surprisingly, this made him happy because he'd found a new musical instrument. Meanwhile, the soldiers got a message from their leader about where they were heading next, the Papal State. The general, named Gerhardt, was marking a symbol on his enemy's face when a soldier appeared and asked what he was doing. Gerhardt explained that it was an advertisement for their mercenary band and that he had marked their prisoners in a similar way. He said he let the other prisoners go, believing this would help them hire more soldiers and make more money. The soldier wondered if it was really that simple. Gerhardt responded that they'd been making money like this for a while, and that it also helped them leave a lasting impression since he might die in battle tomorrow. The soldier looked stunned upon hearing this. Meanwhile, a man approached Gerhardt and showed that Ryuka was there. Ryuka angrily said he was there to collect his pay. Gerhardt, annoyed, told him that his debt was not yet settled. Ryuka asked if Gerhardt wanted him to return the money spent on raising him, then demanded to know how many more battles he had to fight until his debt was repaid, since he had been playing the horn for them. A soldier smirked and sarcastically said they didn't care about his horn since he was just standing at a safe distance and blowing it. Another soldier agreed, saying that if Ryuka wanted respect or an important role, he should do more for them. Gerhardt looked at them and asked if they were horn players. They refused but insisted that playing the horn was nothing compared to fighting on the front line. Gerhardt looked at Ryuka and asked him to blow a tune loud enough to reach the patch of trees nearby. Ryuka, confused, blew the horn loudly. All the soldiers covered their ears because of the noise. When Ryuka stopped, they uncovered their ears in shock. Gerhardt then asked the soldiers who had mocked Ryuka if they could blow the horn as loudly as him. Embarrassed, they refused. Gerhardt stood up and told Ryuka that if he wanted to leave the Corps, he would have to work very hard. Even if he pretended he would be able to leave, his dream of becoming a musician or anything else was unlikely to happen. This made Ryuka angry. Ryuka angrily walked away and a soldier noticed a horn on Ryuka's head and informed Gerhardt about it. Gerhardt said it was strange but explained that Ryuka had it since he was a baby. He guessed that the horn was why Ryuka's parents abandoned him because a defect like that would scare even slave traders. The soldier, frightened, asked if Ryuka was human. Gerhardt laughed and mockingly asked if he thought there was a demon inside Ryuka, then said Ryuka was just a boy who sometimes talked nonsense. The soldier asked what kind of nonsense, and Gerhardt replied that Ryuka claimed he could see sounds, things like that. Then Gerhardt told the soldier he had a message to deliver. They would have to march separately. The soldier asked why, and Gerhardt explained it was for logistical reasons, and revealed they had some land to procure. Later that night, while the soldiers were dragging and beating the civilians, they collected food and planned to pack, since their supplies would only last around 10 days. Meanwhile, as Ryuka was searching for musical instruments, he saw a boy hiding in a barrel. The boy was scared and begged Ryuka for help. Ryuka, shocked, asked where his family was. The boy pointed and Ryuka saw the dead bodies. Ryuka remained silent for a few seconds. Then, trying to change the subject with a smile, he asked the boy if there were any musical items in the village, like sheet music or instruments. After that, Ryuka went outside and, without telling the soldiers anything, sat on a rock and looked at a page with musical notes. He wondered what kind of song it was and wished he knew how to read music. He cleaned the trumpet with a cloth and blew it. Suddenly, he could see the sound waves moving through the air. Gerhardt appeared, having heard the horn, and asked if Ryuka always practiced alone. He told Ryuka that a mercenary like him could never become a musician. Ignoring him, Ryuka kept playing the horn. Gerhardt then said he knew Ryuka let a kid get away. Ryuka paused for a second and then started playing again. Gerhardt explained that they didn't have enough resources to take many prisoners and wished Ryuka would get used to the mercenary life by now. He pointed out that Ryuka's job was to help him command the soldiers and suggested he try and get along with them and enjoy looting and pillaging. Ryuka asked what fun there was in what they were doing. Gerhardt admitted their standards of fun were low, but insisted that what they were doing was important and they were having the fun they deserved. He doubted Ryuka even knew what being a musician was like. Ryuka angrily asked if it meant getting paid to play music, but he said he didn't care what he became as long as he could play in peace. Gerhardt asked if he really enjoyed playing the horn. He knew Ryuka thought he could see sounds but wondered if it was worth all the effort. Ryuka told him it was. He loved playing the horn and hated everything else. He explained that when he saw countless corpses hanging from trees, spears decorated with intestines, and girls his age being raped, playing the horn and seeing the sounds he created spared him from those horrible sights. Ryuka said he wanted to train under a veteran horn player and attend a university to learn musical notation because those things mattered to him. He asked if this helped Gerhardt understand why he wanted to leave. Gerhardt looked at him, then looked down with sad eyes. Changing the topic, he noticed Ryuka's horn and commented on how much it had grown. Ryuka angrily responded, asking who cared. The next day in battle, both sides of the soldiers stood on facing each other. Ryuka, wearing a hat, noticed his head itching. Gerhardt told Ryuka that he would be joining the spearmen that day. Ryuka wondered if this was a joke, because they were under official military command this time, and he was supposed to be part of the cavalry on the front line. Gerhardt explained that their employer, His Excellency, didn't want to share the victory with anyone else, so he couldn't command his soldiers through Ryuka. He ordered Ryuka to join the reserve soldiers. Instead, he told Ryuka, who was now about 14, that he must gain some experience with a spear. While looking at the enemies, he estimated there were around 1,000 of them. A soldier named Colin beside him said they outnumbered the enemy by 700, so they were going to win this battle. Gerhardt agreed with him. Colin ordered the 1st Battalion cavalrymen to prepare for a charge, while the 2nd and 3rd Battalions stood by for further orders. Gerhardt asked Colin if he had any dreams. Colin thought for a moment, and then said he would like to eat a whole turkey and maybe visit a brothel, as only knights could go there. Gerhardt observed the sky and remarked that he seemed to be losing interest in such things, to which Colin replied that there wasn't much else fun to do. Meanwhile, the other army observed them. Some figures, including one with a girl named Zoe, standing on her horse with her hand covering one eye, looked towards Ryuka. Zoe informed them that she had found him and guessed his age to be 14. Another soldier hoped that they got a chance to see Ryuka's power. The battle began and Zoe moved forward. The general with a long head told her to leave the rest to the others once she'd had her fun. As the 1st Battalion charged at them, the general wondered why they weren't approaching and why their archers weren't shooting. Suddenly, Zoe took off her cloak, revealing her large branches similar to Ryuka's. Colin wondered who she was, and as he moved to attack her, she grabbed the horse's leg and made him fall to the ground. Many cavalry soldiers charged at her, but she easily dominated them using her powers. Gerhardt, shocked, noticed that they were retreating and ordered Colin to inform the others in their group. He explained that there was a dangerous person on the other side of the field, and they couldn't win against her. Gerhardt changed his direction, and Colin asked what he was doing since they had no orders to retreat. Colin ordered him to engage the enemy soldier. The soldier next to Ryuka commented on how loud the frontline soldiers were. Ryuka, struggling with his growing horns and feeling pain, asked the soldier to hold his shoulder. The soldier helped him to a shack to rest. Ryuka apologized, but the soldier reassured him not to worry. Ryuka realized that all he did in the battalion was stand still. He lay down and his horns grew bigger. Suddenly, he got injured by a piece of wood piercing his stomach. He breathed heavily, removed the wood, and blood started flowing. He wondered if he shouldn't have done that. From the hill, he watched the battle and wondered if this was how he would die without learning to read music scores. Then he noticed a person lying in front of him with a symbol on their forehead. He remembered Gerhardt saying he did this to leave proof that he lived, even if it was something bad. Ryuka tried to get up, holding his trumpet. He blew the horn with all his might, thinking that if the mercenaries also died, there would be no one left to remember him. He said they were the worst, but he would rather let them live than be forgotten. Gerhardt defended against arrows with his shield while Colin asked if they should move, having gathered their forces as best as possible. Gerhardt decided to wait a bit longer, realizing the situation was getting worse. He noted that enemies were surrounding them, cutting off their escape routes, and targeting any openings in their flanks. The earlier problems with the military soldiers had made things even worse, and with his soldiers scattered, their orders wouldn't be effective. He asked Colin where the woman who threw his horse went, and Colin said she withdrew. Gerhardt wondered about the horned woman and if she was related to Ryuka. He decided it wasn't the time for distractions and ordered the cavalrymen to charge while asking others to create an opening and protect their horses until he gave further orders. Gerhardt wished Ryuka were with them, but suddenly saw light rays coming towards them from a hill. Everyone looked at the light in shock, wondering if it signaled the start of something. One soldier thought it sounded like the retreat signal, and Gerhardt realized it might be Ryuka's doing. The general with a long head said Ryuka's powers must have emerged by then, finding it exciting to have a new comrade. Ryuka looked at the light wave in front of him with pride, blowing his horn again to create paths for the soldiers. Gerhardt noticed the beam pointing at a specific spot, realizing Ryuka planned to break the encirclement there. The arrow stopped, and Gerhardt ordered the cavalry to break the encirclement in the direction of the light beam. Colin, shocked, asked Gerhardt about the light, and he explained it was their signal to retreat, blown by Ryuka to show their retreat route. Gerhardt and the cavalry made their way, killing soldiers as they went until they finally broke through. After that, the beam of light changed position, which Gerhardt also noticed. Colin suggested they should aim for that spot now, and Gerhardt agreed. They started following the light and sound. Gerhardt noticed that all the soldiers had started understanding Ryuka's signals, not just him. He realized it wasn't just a sound. They could decode the intent behind it. He smiled proudly, thinking that Ryuka was actually leading them. All the soldiers kept following the beam of light and striking at those spots. They finally gained dominance, leaving the enemy soldiers wondering what had just happened and how they all coordinated so effectively. They couldn't believe that the signal had helped them achieve such a feat. Ryuka, sitting on the hill, kept blowing the horn. He wondered why he had always been able to see sounds, but he had never wanted to show them to anyone. He blew the horn alone, and only he could see its sounds. He thought he never needed anyone else, but now, using it today, he realized it was actually fun as he created a whole barrier on top of his army to save them from the arrows. Suddenly, Gerhardt started making his own way. Colin asked where he was going, and Gerhardt said he was leaving the rest to him as he started making his way to Ryuka. Ryuka, covered in blood, sat there with a smile. As he was about to fall, someone held him. Ryuka looked at the man, who asked him how he did that. Ryuka also noticed he had horns on his head just like him. Another woman with horns appeared, asking him to stay still. She put her hand on his stomach and absorbed half of his wound, telling him that he should be okay now. Meanwhile, Gerhardt appeared there and saw different kinds of figures standing around Ryuka, wondering what in the world was going on. The general with the long head said they came here for Ryuka, explaining that Ryuka was not a normal human. He was a Ramius, someone on whom branches grew and within whom rested a power that surpassed the natural realm. The light he displayed just now was the power of a Ramius, and on their 14th birthday, a Ramius power spouts, and they awaken. He then asked Ryuka if he wanted to join him, as he wanted Ryuka as his army's horn player. Holding himself in pain and covered in blood, Gerhardt moved forward and declared that the boy was in his care. However, if the general wanted Ryuka, he was willing to let him have him under one condition. The general asked what it was, and Gerhardt replied that he wanted him to teach Ryuka music. Ryuka, holding his trumpet in shock, looked at Gerhardt. The long-headed man, with confusion, asked if that was it, wondering why Gerhardt would propose such a condition. Gerhardt replied that he didn't know, but he had always felt that everything about this world just sucked except for that boy there, whom he could see something in that he could not. He further said that the long-headed general that, based on his looks, he appeared to be some kind of fancy clergy and should be able to fulfill his request. He asked Ryuka if he was alright with this, and Ryuka confirmed it. The long-headed man then declared it was settled, asking if they should depart now. The woman gave Ryuka a shoulder to lean on, and while moving from there, Ryuka asked Gerhardt if his horn playing was good. Gerhardt replied that he had never had an ear for music, but he would say Ryuka had become pretty damn good that day. Ryuka smiled, thanked him, and bid him farewell. While walking with the woman, he remembered Gerhardt's words and blushed while laughing. With that compliment, tears filled his eyes, and he started crying tears of happiness. While Gerhardt sat on the hill, some soldiers approached from behind, realizing he was still alive. They debated on whether they should capture him as a prisoner or simply cut off his head as a trophy. One soldier placed his axe on Gerhardt's neck and asked the others how much they thought his head was worth, then proceeded to chop it off from his body. The next day, in the capital city of Terami in the Papal State, Ryuka woke up on a soft bed. The long-headed man greeted him, and Ryuka asked where they were. The man explained they were in Terami, and specifically in the nursing room of the barracks. He mentioned that Ryuka had fallen unconscious on his way there. Introducing himself as the sovereign of the state, he revealed that he was the Pope, the highest authority in the Papal State, and suggested Ryuka could refer to him as His Holiness. The Pope then asked Ryuka to introduce himself. After thinking for a moment, Ryuka said he had been raised by a group of mercenaries and that he played the horn. He shared his dream of becoming a musician. The Pope expressed his willingness to help Ryuka achieve his dream, but asked for Ryuka's help in return to protect the country. He pointed out the window, indicating that he wanted Ryuka to protect the source of power from the Papal State, a tower they could see from the room. In 1294, during that time, mankind carried out wars over the towering structures that dominated the landscape. These oddly shaped gigantic towers cast their shadows over the world, symbolizing power and influence. While traveling in the carriage, the Pope explained that the tower was a remnant of an ancient yet advanced civilization, holding a vast heritage of their culture and technology. He added that the tower was not only the foundation of their civilization, but also the subject of religious reverence. The institution governing it was led by him, the Pope, After sharing this information with Ryuka, he asked if it made sense to him. Ryuka replied that it was common sense, but he didn't know it because he was raised by people without common sense. The Pope reassured him that it was fine as long as he was willing to learn. Ryuka then asked if the helmet the Pope wore was uncomfortable. The Pope told him not to worry about it. After that, they reached a cave. Ryuka asked where they were going, and the Pope said they were heading to his house. When they exited the cave, Ryuka saw a large mansion. The Pope informed him that this Sequoia mansion would be his new home. Ryuka was shocked, and the Pope explained that he would live there with other Ramis like him. He further explained that the existence of the Rami was not public knowledge because their powers surpassed those of humans, which would make people fear them. He added that all the soldiers knew what the Rami were, and there were even rumors among the citizens. The Pope showed Ryuka his room and then presented him with an instrument. Ryuka was stunned when he saw it. The Pope explained that it was a trumpet, an exceptionally sophisticated brass trumpet, created using the advanced technology found in the tower. He gave Ryuka the trumpet and told him that from now on he would protect the tower. The Pope also promised to provide Ryuka with the necessary resources for his musical education as per their agreement. However, he asked Ryuka to demonstrate his power once more before officially employing him. The Pope took Ryuka to the roof of the mansion. Ryuka wondered where they were going. The Pope told him that two cloaked people beside him were also Rami, just like him, and introduced themselves as Demi and Zoe. Zoe apologized for throwing a horse at him, and Ryuka looked at her in confusion. The Pope explained that the city of Terumi was a large burg and they were currently on the wall facing the ocean. He asked Ryuka if he could see the ships surrounding the harbor. Ryuka confirmed it and noted that there were more than a few. The Pope said all of them were dispatched by the neighboring country's military. Ryuka asked, confused, if that was not bad. The Pope told him that for a month they had blocked off trade. However, the tower contained a large amount of valuable heritage, and the country was also blessed by the technology and information of the tower. He further revealed that the tower had other functions, but hoped Ryuka understood why he wished for him to protect it. Ryuka noticed a person nearby and wondered if he was the commanding officer of this place. The person approached the Pope and bowed respectfully. The Pope asked how he was doing and introduced him as Pietro, the imperator of the state. The Pope then asked Ryuka to line up. Ryuka looked down at the soldiers below and felt stressed, realizing the Pope meant serious business. The Pope told Ryuka that his mission was to command the soldiers. Meanwhile, an enemy soldier talked with his captain, wondering why they were still skulking around the beach. The captain asked him to guess, and the soldier suggested they were waiting for their siege weapons to arrive, as that was the only way to penetrate the wall. The soldier also asked if they were safe being so close to the enemy. The captain reassured them that they were as safe as they could be because the enemy thought their goal was to block access to the harbor. The captain explained that they would wait for the enemy to loosen their security and then strike when they thought they were safe. The soldier guessed this meant they would be stuck there for a while. As they talked, they suddenly saw a beam of light coming from the castle. The soldiers looked at the beam in shock, and the Pope told Ryuka that he wanted him to eliminate every soldier on the beach. He explained that he couldn't allow an enemy camp right outside his gate and that the enemies were likely waiting for a siege device to arrive. So he wanted those eyesores wiped out and told his crew not to let them escape, asking Pietro if he agreed. Pietro agreed, and Ryuka said he understood the objective but had never been in command before. He said it was complicated and he didn't know their troop signals. The Pope assured him that they would be the same as his own. Ryuka then said he wasn't ready to bear that burden since the soldiers' lives depended on him. The Pope told him he was overthinking and to think of it as a little test. Ryuka agreed to do it if he got to keep the instrument, but he didn't want to hear any complaints if he failed. The Pope agreed, encouraging him by saying that he could fail as many times as he wanted because humans learn from their mistakes. The soldier sitting there looked stressed, thinking he was doomed because a kid was commanding them. He believed that while every soldier should be ready to die in combat, this test was a foolish mission. Suddenly on the battlefield, he saw a beam of light on them. They looked at it back, wondering if everyone else saw it too. The soldier realized it was the signal and they started marching to the sound. Everyone was confused, not understanding what was going on, but they felt their feet moving in sync with the sound. The soldier thought it felt like the light was telling them their next move. The enemies on the beach also noticed and prepared for an attack. The soldier felt like the kids' thoughts were flowing into their minds, guiding them with a duo of light and sound. The general commanded them to split just like the beam of light, and all the soldiers followed the command. Meanwhile, the Pope appeared on the roof with Pietro and explained that by drawing those beams of light on the battlefield, Ryuka was conveying information both audibly and visually. Even complicated orders were communicated instantly, allowing the soldiers to execute the coordinated maneuvers. He asked Pietro if he found that interesting, and Pietro agreed. The Pope further explained that this ability had another interesting feature. Hearing Ryuka play made the soldiers feel good. He had learned from prisoners taken in the last battle that moving in sync with the sound felt good to them. They said it felt like they were moving by their own will, even though they were just following the signals. The Pope noted that from their vantage point they could only see the light, but he assumed that only those under Ryuka's command received his thoughts. He asked Pietro if he found this interesting, and Pietro simply agreed. While blowing the horn, Ryuka had flashbacks of Gerhardt when he used to practice in the stable. He remembered Gerhardt indirectly calling him an idiot, saying that the wars were never won by idiots. Then Ryuka ignored him and focused on his package. He recalled Gerhardt explaining about cavalry and enemies with crossovers, giving him various examples. Gerhardt also taught him about enemies and different types of soldiers on the battlefield, trying to spark his interest. But Ryuka kept practicing and responding, wondering why Gerhardt was teaching him about military strategy. In the end, all Ryuka wanted was for the Pope to teach him about music. On the other hand, the enemy soldiers asked their captain if they should retreat because the Pope's army was cutting off their escape routes and the gate was open. The captain looked stunned when he realized they were letting in wounded soldiers, so he ordered them to raise the flag and storm the gate. He said they would charge inside and aim for the commander. Even if their rear was exposed, it meant fewer soldiers in front of them. They decided to ignore the soldiers and rush through the gate. The enemy started rushing towards the gate. The Pope instructed Ryuka to lure them in, give the signal to the soldiers waiting to ambush, and then surround the enemy for victory. Ryuka looked at the Pope and Pietro and told them they had it under control. The enemy soldier and captain thought it was kind of fun, while the Pope ordered Zoe to take over. Zoe moved forward and jumped down the wall, shocking Ryuka. She snapped the neck of the enemy captain midair. The Pope moved forward and asked the stunned Ryuka, who was staring at the enemy captain's head in the air, if he had ever seen Zoe fight. They both looked down and watched Zoe killing and throwing enemies, causing destruction single-handedly. Ryuka looked at her in complete shock as the Pope explained that Zoe was his strongest Ramus and that Ryuka would do well to get along with her, so she could protect him too. Ryuka, standing there, realized that's why she apologized for throwing the horse at him. Later, inside the castle, the Pope and Ryuka sat on chairs, with Ryuka smiling at the trumpet. The Pope told him he was accepting him as his Ramus, so Ryuka would be at his beck and call from now on. His duty would be the protection of the country and its tower. The Pope then started telling him about the enemy, asking Demi to show him. Demi asked Ryuka to put his hand over one of her eyes so she could share her vision. Ryuka did as asked, and suddenly, he could see a huge tower in a foreign country. He told the Pope he was seeing it in his vision. Demi explained it was her vision, and the Pope said that through Demi's eyes, Ryuka was seeing a faraway state. The Pope explained that the state was named the Empire of Erin and that they were compelled to defeat it. Ryuka asked if the tower in the background was the one in the Empire, and the Pope confirmed it. He told Ryuka that there were a total of 9 towers in the world, and among them, the Papal State's Tower and the Empire's Tower were exceptionally large. Together, they were called the Grand Towers. Ryuka asked if the whole war was about those towers, and the Pope confirmed it, but added that there was another goal they had. They wanted to kill someone known as the Garland Ramus, and then he showed his gratitude to Demi. The Pope explained that Garland was a Ramus with significant power, and since he first appeared as an Empire soldier 4 months ago, he had spread to neighboring countries. If they allowed him to continue, the Empire could dominate the world. Ryuka asked if the Pope wanted him to kill Garland, and the Pope confirmed, saying he needed the power of as many Rami as possible, no matter how weak they may be. Ryuka then asked if he could quit his job once they had killed the Garland. The Pope stayed silent for a moment and then asked for the reason behind Ryuka's request. Ryuka explained that he had felt a strong urge while playing the horn earlier that day, as if it wasn't what he wanted to do. Despite leaving the mercenary band and having a chance to study music now, playing for the army would mean nothing had really changed for him. So he proposed a condition. After the Garland was dealt with, he wanted to quit as a horn player. However, he still expected the Pope to support his studies afterward. Ryuka made it clear that if the Pope refused, he would leave right then and return the instrument as well. The Pope stayed quiet for a moment, and then extended his hand to seal the deal. Ryuka smiled and shook hands with him. Then Ryuka looked at his trumpet and asked about the Garland, wondering if he really was that powerful. The Pope explained that 4 months ago, the Garland had destroyed an entire country. This shocked Ryuka, and he clarified if Garland had destroyed the country's leadership or captured its capital. The Pope confirmed that the Garland's attack had wiped out the entire land, burning everything to the ground with just one strike. The next morning, Ryuka woke up from a nightmare about the battlefield, disturbed by the sound waves. He realized it was the reveille, a bugle call. After getting ready, he went to see the Pope, who was sitting on his throne. The Pope told Ryuka that he wanted him not to be just a bugler, but also the captain in charge of the Rami. He was impressed by Ryuka's actions in the previous battle and believed he had potential. Ryuka confirmed if the Pope really wanted him as a captain. The Pope explained that as a captain, Ryuka would lead during combat and take care of the Rami at all times, since they were irreplaceable. So he wanted him to help them stay in tip-top shape in body and spirit. Ryuka felt annoyed by the responsibility, thinking that no one in their right mind would take on such a job. Ryuka entered a room where he found a man tied up. The man introduced himself as Miura, another Ramus like Ryuka, and asked to be untied with a smile. Ryuka obliged, and they walked through the mansion together. Miura apologized for the earlier situation and explained that he was Ryuka's new roommate, having joined the place just 4 months ago. When Ryuka asked why he was tied up, Miura brushed off the question, saying it wasn't something to worry about. As they walked, Miura mentioned that the Pope instructed him to teach the rules, but there weren't many. They mainly focused on simple tasks like cleaning, training, and worship. Ryuka inquired about the training they had, and Miura explained that it included armed combat, horse riding, and sometimes dressing up and walking around the mansion. Essentially, they did everything a soldier did. As they walked on the grounds, Ryuka asked Miura where everyone else was. Miura explained that they often skipped practice and did their own things, rarely eating together. Despite this, Miura offered his hand to Ryuka, who was tired and sitting on the ground, indicating that Ryuka would not be alone anymore. Later, they had a meal together, and Miura mentioned that the place was not so bad. Ryuka silently agreed, especially while looking at the soup they were eating. Miura then brought up the news that Ryuka was going to be a captain, suggesting that the Pope might be joking. Ryuka expressed his disinterest in warfare, finding it troublesome. However, Miura pointed out that it did not matter what Ryuka wanted. If the Pope wanted it, Ryuka had to do it. Just then, Demi arrived and knocked on the door, informing them that they had work to do. Miura asked about the task, and Demi revealed that the Rami had been instructed to retake a seized fortress. Miura and Ryuka joined Demi as they headed to the meeting called by the Pope. The soldier leading the meeting explained that the fortress was initially used as a logistics base but fell out of use due to operational issues. It was vacant when the occupation began again, and soldiers gathered information during patrols. They discovered that the enemy force was small, around 100 or so soldiers, likely remnants from a previous battle who stumbled upon the fortress. However, there were challenges. While all the Rami listened attentively, Ryuka's expression showed a bit of annoyance. The soldier continued, describing the fortress's location by a wide river with a single stone bridge as the only access point. They attempted to use a makeshift battering ram, but it was not effective enough. He looked at them and explained that considering all these factors, they concluded that their current forces would not be sufficient. That's why they sent a message to headquarters in Terami for reinforcements. In his mind, the soldier realized that having His Holiness personally present was an unexpected but valuable experience, especially with a rumored Rami among them. The Pope then asked Miura if he'd ever been in a real battle before. Miura confidently confirmed that he hadn't, and the Pope expressed his trust in Miura and Ryuka for the upcoming task. Miura assured with a smile that they could handle it, and he told Ryuka that he would take charge of the plan tonight. Afterward, Ryuka and Miura sat outside near a tree where Demi appeared and asked them to cover their eyes with blindfolds. Ryuka wondered about this, and Demi explained that since the attack would occur at night, they needed to adjust their eyes to darkness beforehand. She handed a piece of cloth to Miura, who had tears in his eyes. Ryuka noticed and commented that he thought Miura had stopped crying. Apologizing, Miura admitted that he might have seemed pathetic, but he was scared for the upcoming fight. Curious, Ryuka asked what had happened. Miura revealed that he got scared easily and was afraid of having to fight that night. Ryuka expressed confusion, questioning if Miura wasn't supposed to be strong like the others, especially after witnessing Zoe's impressive fighting skills the day before. Miura explained that not all Rami were the same, and he was afraid of using his powers. He shared that since childhood he had been mocked for having a distinctive feature, a branch on his head, and this had made him fearful. He went on to explain that just the day before he had attempted to escape from the mansion. He didn't want to risk his life fighting soldiers. However, Demi and the Pope's personal guards caught him before he could make his escape. Ryuka realized that this was why he had been tied up earlier. Miura continued, revealing that the same fate had befallen his house, hometown, and mother when the garland appeared. That's why the Pope had suggested taking revenge together, and Miura admitted he did want revenge too. Despite trying to despise the garland, he couldn't bring himself to do it. In his heart, all he felt was relief that he hadn't been caught in the destruction. After opening up to Ryuka, Miura told him that his life was in Ryuka's hands tonight. He asked Ryuka to ensure that even if their strategy failed or things went wrong, Ryuka would make sure that he didn't die, addressing him as captain. Annoyed, Ryuka reluctantly put on the blindfold, reiterating that he was not a captain. Meanwhile, the captain atop the castle felt hungry and expressed a desire to go home. Another soldier with him questioned their purpose at this location and asked about their plan. They'd noticed someone across the bridge but dismissed it, assuming no one would attack them at this hour. Meanwhile, Demi and Ryuka chatted on the mansion roof. Demi assured Ryuka that she brought Miura back to ensure he didn't die if things went south. The Pope arrived and told Ryuka the soldiers were ready. Ryuka confirmed his readiness, and the Pope mentioned they were waiting for Ryuka's signal. Ryuka took the trumpet, and the Pope instructed him to start the battle. Ryuka blew the horn, creating a beam of light that shocked all the soldiers. They saw the light traveling across the bridge, surprising the enemy soldiers on the roof who were confused by the sight. Before the attack, the Pope instructed Miura to sprint forward, urging him to run faster towards the gate. Miura dashed like lightning, following the beam of light, and jumped into the air to land inside the castle. Ryuko recalled planning with the Pope that Miura should enter the castle alone to create a distraction, pulling guards away from the main gate. Ryuka asked about the assault plan, and the Pope assured him that Miura's speed would handle breaching the wall easily. The soldiers looked puzzled at Miura, wondering about the light and his sudden appearance. The Pope mentioned Miura's flaw of not keeping up with his own speed, which Miura acknowledged, noting that crashing into obstacles could hurt or injure him. That's why Miura would follow the guiding light and Ryuka's signals to navigate through the darkness. Demi would also help guide him with her enhanced vision, even at his fast pace. Miura, holding a sword, swiftly dealt with a soldier by slicing off his neck. The enemy soldier shouted to wake everyone up, alerting them to the attack. Ryuka used his trumpet to create a path for Miura. Before doing so, he asked the Pope if he made a mistake, fearing that it could lead to Miura's death. The Pope confirmed that such responsibility came with being a captain. While sitting under a tree, Ryuka told Miura to look for a signal indicating an opening during the battle. He planned to help Miura escape once the battle began. Miura was puzzled by this and asked Ryuka if he could really run away safely with his help, considering the severe punishment for aiding a deserter. Ryuka acknowledged the risk but mentioned that he himself was let off easily before, possibly because of the importance of the Rami. Miura reassured Ryuka that he would be okay, and Ryuka explained that he asked because he thought he understood how Miura felt. Miura swiftly followed the beam of light, eager to escape from the situation. The enemy soldiers, wary of the light, debated the need for a torch and regretted their decision to come. Meanwhile, Miura raced through the fortress, swiftly dispatching any foes in his path with his sword. In mere moments, he had explored every corner of the fortress and eliminated all opposition. His ruthless efficiency was evident as he swiftly ended the lives of those who stood in his way, primarily targeting their necks with precise strikes. Eventually, the soldiers managed to open the main gate with a large log, allowing Miura to return to the roof of their mansion where Ryuka waited. The Pope appeared and praised Demi, Ryuka, and especially Miura for their efforts. Miura, exhausted and sweaty, sat breathing heavily as Ryuka questioned why he didn't escape when signaled. Miura hesitated to answer and simply said, "That's it." Later, Miura and Ryuka met with the Pope again. The Pope asked Miura if he also intended to leave once the garland was defeated, to which Ryuka confirmed. However, Ryuka added a condition. The Pope must ensure a good life for him. The Pope then inquired if Ryuka's acceptance for leadership meant he had embraced being a captain. Ryuka agreed, acknowledging that accepting these terms would make him the captain. The Pope turned to Miura, who also confirmed his agreement, and the Pope declared the matter settled. After that, the Pope walked away, and Ryuka pointed out that he had already told the Pope he would listen. However, Miura looked a bit confused and said he didn't know the reason for fighting. Shouldn't it be something like avenging his family or reclaiming his country of birth or something worth fighting for? Instead, it seemed like he was just trying to run away by quitting the army. Ryuko responded it didn't matter anyway. The world sucked and it made sense to want to escape from it. He assured Miura not to worry, and Miura smiled and said Ryuka was surprisingly a good captain. Meanwhile, Demi was present behind the wall and overheard their conversation. She informed Her Holiness that she had spotted an advancing Empire regiment about 300 miles from the Papal State, likely with a few Rami among their ranks. The Pope, who had for the first time taken off his helmet, sat in his chair with a smile, expressing excitement about the approaching war between Rami. In the very next moment, a huge ball of swords appeared in the air, controlled by someone's hand. As they clenched their fists, the ball of swords exploded, killing many people beneath it. Two figures sitting on horses had a conversation about something they hadn't encountered yet. One person mentioned they hadn't reached the Papal State yet, and they believed their only task was to kill the Bugle Brat to achieve world peace. The other person agreed with the sentiment. In the next scene, Miura and Ryuka walked through the cave. Miura asked Ryuka if he had his knife and rations with him. Ryuka confirmed this with an annoyed expression. Miura then asked if they were riding in separate carriages. Ryuka confirmed that they were, and Miura expressed that Ryuka was the only one he felt comfortable talking to. Ryuka repeated the sentiment. As they emerged from the cave, they spotted the Pope and two carriages surrounded by Rami. The Pope then ordered the departure. They sat in the carriage and departed as a Ramis squad. Ryuka looked outside and reminisced about a time when the Pope had appeared while he was practicing alone. The Pope had expressed his gladness at seeing Ryuka practice frequently. He asked Ryuka if he could read music scores fluently by now. Ryuka admitted that he didn't have any problems with scales but struggled with note values. However, he was determined to learn them soon. He expressed his gratitude to the Pope, but the Pope brushed it off, saying there was no need to thank him as this was part of their deal, and there was much more for Ryuka to do. Hearing this, Ryuka was a bit confused. The Pope then explained that he wanted Ryuka to lead the Rami on an expedition the next day. Ryuka, feeling a bit annoyed, asked why. The Pope went on to explain that 3 days ago, Demi had spotted an entire army approaching the Papal State, and there were a few Rami among the enemy ranks. He mentioned Cannoli Castle, located on the state border, where they planned to wait for the approaching army. Ryuka asked if the enemy Rami included the Garland, but the Pope clarified that they were bringing the other Rami instead, as the Empire possessed several Rami like them. The Pope also gave Ryuka another task, to ensure that his Ramis squad got along well and became best friends by the time they returned. Ryuka, looking stressed, questioned how this task was related to the expedition. The Pope explained that there would be 7 Rami, including herself, at the Cannoli Castle, emphasizing the importance of knowing all allies. She told Ryuka that as a captain, it was his responsibility to gain his subordinates' trust. The Pope suggested that Ryuka start by getting to know everyone's abilities. Remembering this advice, Ryuka greeted the Rami present in his carriage. However, everyone was silent except for one who was sleeping and another who seemed scared. When Ryuka greeted the scared Rami, she nervously asked what was happening. Ryuka introduced himself and expressed that it was nice to meet her. The scared Ramis, with tears in her eyes, introduced herself as Pappy, and nervously replied that it was nice to meet Ryuka, all the while repeatedly looking at her thumb. Ryuka noticed this but ignored it, focusing instead on asking about Pappy's power. Pappy, nervously biting her thumb, asked Ryuka if he was asking to fire the ones with the useless powers. Ryuka reassured Pappy, asking why he would do such a thing. Pappy, still nervous, lifted her hand and picked up a nearby box without touching it, demonstrating her ability to move objects. She explained that she could levitate objects without physical contact. Ryuka was surprised by Pappy's power and suggested they could use it to throw enemies away. However, Pappy nervously mentioned that the wooden box was about as heavy as she could levitate. She apologized, feeling useless and weak, but Ryuka tried to encourage her, saying it was okay. Looking at Demi, Pappy suggested that if she combined her power with Demi's, they might find a useful application for it. She asked Demi if she was correct. Demi looked at Pappy annoyedly and told her not to talk to her, calling her an idiot. Pappy sadly apologized to her, and Ryuka wondered what her problem was. Demi then advised Ryuka not to bother trying to get friendly with anyone there, warning him that everyone there had a screw loose, including the daft woman and Zoe over there. Ryuka asked what she meant, and she explained that Zoe was quite literally a child, mentally, gesturing towards her sleeping peacefully. Demi revealed that Zoe's real age is 27, but due to her power, her mental age is that of a 9-year-old's. She warned Ryuka that a 9-year-old with the power to annihilate hundreds of trained soldiers could be unstoppable if she went into a fit of rage. Pappy, with her shaky voice, agreed with Demi, suggesting they stay away from Zoe. Demi also cautioned Ryuka about the others in the other carriage, mentioning that they were also unpredictable, so it's best not to do anything that could trigger them. After stopping the carriage in the village, they decided to take a break and allow the soldiers to prepare new horses. They planned to stop every 20 miles or so to switch horses. Ryuka and Miura sat together, discussing everything that Demi and the Pope had said. With a smile, Miura said he understood what Demi was trying to convey, and he reassured that as long as they performed their duties correctly on the battlefield, everything would be fine. He also mentioned that he understood the Pope's message about building trust among the Rami, expressing his belief that Ryuka could befriend everyone. Miura then asked Ryuka about the mood in the carriage. Just as another Ramus appeared behind Ryuka, Miura identified the others in the carriage as Oscar and Kura, and upon noticing the new arrival, Miura addressed him as Oscar. Oscar suddenly sat with Ryuka, putting an arm around his shoulder and asked Ryuka why he fought. With an emotionless expression, Oscar's face showed no emotions as he posed this question, which made Ryuka a bit scared. He remained silent, wondering what had happened to Oscar. Oscar rephrased his question and asked Ryuka who he fought for, urging him to share his reasons. Ryuka responded that he wasn't fighting for anyone's sake. He was only working there to pursue his dream of becoming a musician. Oscar questioned if that dream was something worth pursuing in these live times marked by war and escalating aggression from the Empire. As a Ramus born into this troubled era, Oscar asked if Ryuka truly believed he could fight for his personal interests alone. Annoyed, Ryuka asked Oscar what age he believed was appropriate to have a dream and angrily told him not to bother him. Oscar stated that it seemed Ryuka didn't understand clearly, so he repeated that he fought for the sake of his holiness. He asked Ryuka to repeat after him or else he would kill him. Ryuka looked at him in shock, unable to believe if Oscar was in his right mind or not. Oscar expressed that he owed a great debt to the Pope, one that he dedicated his life to repay no matter what. He firmly gripped Ryuka and emphasized that he didn't care about his own life as he felt deeply indebted to his holiness. He urged Ryuka to dedicate his life as well in returning the favor. In response, Ryuka angrily reminded him of the deal they made, which is why he had to work with Oscar. Ryuka called out to Miura, but Miura already dashed away with his incredible speed, hiding behind a tree. In his mind, Ryuka labeled Miura as a coward. Meanwhile, Oscar demanded that Ryuka swear loyalty to his holiness to avoid facing consequences. Ryuka rejected the idea of showing loyalty to someone wearing a strange helmet like the Pope's. This angered Oscar, who stood up and grabbed Ryuka's neck tightly. However, before he could do anything, another Ramus attacked Oscar, causing him to fall unconscious to the ground. Another Ramus appeared with a smile and pointed Oscar for his actions, stating that disliking Ryuka didn't justify attempting to break his neck. Oscar defended himself, expressing reluctance to trust someone who didn't share his objectives. The other Ramus assured Oscar that he needn't worry too much about his trust issues and mentioned that he couldn't die anyway. Turning to Ryuka, the Ramus asked if he was alright, prompting Ryuka to recognize her as the same one who had healed his wounds previously. Introducing herself as Kura, the Ramus confirmed that she indeed was the one who saved Ryuka's life. Kura sat with Ryuka and explained her ability that allowed her to transfer wounds and diseases. She mentioned that when Oscar attempted to break Ryuka's neck, she redirected the injury to herself and then to Oscar. Ryuka realized that Oscar had indeed tried to kill him. Curious, Ryuka asked Kura if transferring wounds didn't cause her pain. Kura explained that momentary transfers were painless for her, but that one wound from Ryuka did hurt her, prompting her to clutch her stomach. Ryuka apologized for the situation, but Kura reassured him that it was alright. Then, in a surprising revelation, Kura whispered to Ryuka that she actually enjoyed pain. This left Ryuka wide-eyed, unable to comprehend how someone could love pain. During that moment, someone called Ryuka's name and he turned to see the Pope beckoning him over. Ryuka had a moment of realization, understanding that Demi was right. Everyone around him seemed to be insane. He approached the Pope, who mentioned that there was something he wanted Ryuka to see. Demi, with one eye covered, was also present. Ryuka mirrored her action and looked in the direction the Pope indicated, seeing soldiers from the Empire lying in ambush on the highway ahead. The Pope explained that they were likely scouts sent to intercept reinforcements. Ryuka inquired about any detours they could take, and the Pope informed him that the forest path was the only properly paved route. He expressed concern that their march would slow on the unpaved road, potentially causing them to arrive late at the castle. As a result, he asked Ryuka in his role as captain for his proposal. Ryuka looked at him in confusion. The soldiers hid within the bushes, keeping a narrow watch over the path and looking for the appearance of any enemies. They discussed how the only route from the Papal State to Cannoli Castle passed through this forest, so any enemies were likely to pass through here. However, as one soldier spoke, an arrow suddenly pierced his fellow's head, killing him instantly. The surrounding soldiers panicked, asking if their captain was dead. Realizing they were under attack, they murmured in confusion about not hearing any approaching footsteps and wondered where the arrow had come from. They speculated that if enemies were on this path, they might have encountered the patrol sent out earlier. Suddenly, they noticed a beam of light among them, prompting confusion and surprise. At the moment, the enemy soldiers emerged from behind, launching a swift attack and killing them in an instant. Ryuka used his trumpet to create paths for his soldiers, who then utilized these signals to locate and eliminate enemies in the forest. They devised a strategy to capture one area at a time and launch surprise attacks on the enemy forces. All the Rami members observe Ryuka coordinating signals within the forest. Ryuka's plan involved using Demi's enhanced sight to identify and relay enemy positions, giving them a tactical advantage. Demi suggested incorporating Pappy's ability to move objects for stealth attacks, as she could manipulate light objects at a distance. Ryuka clarified that her power's effectiveness relied on range rather than weight, allowing her to control the trajectory of arrows and execute surprise attacks on enemies from unexpected angles. They launched attacks on the enemies hidden in the bushes, using arrows guided by Ryuka's indications of enemy locations. Pappy controlled the arrows with her power, effectively eliminating the enemy forces. The enemies in the forest were perplexed as they couldn't find a safe spot to hide or a clear path due to Demi's ability to see their movements. They'd noticed that the arrows were accurately hitting their targets, and the light was exposing their positions, leading them to reflect if the Rami were involved. Upon reaching the campsite, they hoped it would offer safety. As they entered the campsite, they encountered Oscar, a tall boy with multiple swords impaled in his body. Despite his injuries, he stood upright with lifeless eyes and attacked them with his sword, resulting in their defeat. Ryuka and his crew claimed victory, then settled in their carriage to resume their journey. The Pope informed them of an impending major battle the next day, urging everyone to rest and prepare for it. They rested on their beds and Ryuka conversed with the Pope, mentioning the general battle plan that had been discussed earlier and now relied on him. The Pope inquired about Ryuka's interactions with the other Rami and whether he had befriended everyone yet. Ryuka shared that despite his best efforts, he had nearly been killed by them. The Pope agreed, acknowledging that everyone had their own challenges, so Ryuka needed to be clever in handling situations. He expressed confidence in Ryuka's ability to gain the trust of everyone. The Pope emphasized that Ryuka's role wasn't just about becoming strong, but also earning respect and admiration. As he walked away, he mentioned that Ryuka's efforts would eventually benefit the nation and the world, encouraging him to gather diverse experiences. Ryuka remained silent, prompting the Pope to inquire if something was wrong. Ryuka explained that he had agreed to become the captain and promised to defeat the Garland, but in return he needed help in learning to read music scores. He clarified to the Pope that his goal revolved around his trumpet and music, echoing Oscar's earlier words. He mentioned what he had heard about the Garland and the current times, but he expressed that he cared very little about it. The Pope reminded Ryuka before leaving that everything discussed was none of his concern and advised him to remember that. He expressed concern that Ryuka's approach wouldn't suffice because Ryuka was the only one who couldn't run away. The next day, they finally reached their destination and stood atop the fortress. The Pope observed that the Empire soldiers seemed prepared as well. He ordered Ryuka to sound the call for battle, which Ryuka did using his trumpet. The gates also opened and Rami emerged from within. On the opposite side, the enemies were also prepared, with a black armored figure standing there, awaiting for the battle to start. They acknowledged the sound of the horn that the battle had just begun. While sitting at the table, the Pope asked them to explain their overall battle plan. He began by saying they first had to deal with the common soldiers and that he would leave that task to the station lieutenant colonel. He revealed that he knew all there was to know about this castle and mentioned that the soldiers were all aware of the Rami, as they would be fighting together. He then told Ryuka that the Rami squad would be spearheaded by him and that he wanted Ryuka to deal with the enemy Rami. Ryuka looked at him while holding a piece in his hand as they continued planning. The Pope revealed that among the enemy ranks they had detected an exceptionally powerful Rami, and he could only leave that Rami to Zoe. He said he had stationed Oscar to guard the path from above the precipice and had the other Rami on standby, ready to deploy according to circumstances should any complications arise. Ryuka asked what kind of complications, and the Pope answered that they could include the appearance of a new Ramus on the enemy's side or something happening to Zoe. Ryuka, confused, asked if Zoe was not the strongest soldier they had and what could possibly happen to her. The Pope acknowledged that Zoe was indeed very strong, but expressed doubt about her winning in a head-on battle. While moving a piece, he explained to Ryuka that even Zoe had a weakness and asked if anyone had informed him about the nature of her power. Ryuka guessed it was superhuman strength. The Pope corrected him, explaining that Zoe borrowed power from her future self. Outside the castle, a soldier asked His Excellency if it was really fine not to attack the castle directly. Holding his sword, the black armored figure replied that it was totally fine. He explained that as long as he could eliminate the woman they had as their vanguard, he could take care of all the soldiers. He told the soldier that if it became impossible for him and he lost to her, then they would all face a painful death. He assured the soldier that there was no need to waste soldiers because the entire battle depended on him and the woman on the other side, Zoe. The black armored figure then used his power to create a gigantic sword ball and threw it towards the castle. He declared that he would break the wall and instructed the others to go wild inside once he was done. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Ryuka was shocked after the Pope revealed Zoe's power to him. Still confused, Ryuka asked what that meant. The Pope explained with an example. If Zoe borrowed 1 hour from her future, she would wield double her power for that hour. Ryuka then asked what would happen if she borrowed more time. The Pope replied that her power would increase proportionately. Inside the castle, Zoe spotted the gigantic sword ball approaching. Using her power, she broke the entire ball and destroyed the swords within it. The Pope explained to Ryuka that if Zoe borrowed the power of the next 24 hours for 15 minutes, she would have the combined power of 97 Zoes. He further explained that once the borrowed power ran out, she would spend the borrowed hours sleeping. This is why she was still mentally a child. Long ago, she had spent too much of her power and ended up slumbering for over 10 years. The Pope emphasized to Ryuka that Zoe was not invincible. Despite her formidable abilities, she was still a young girl. After witnessing Zoe's power and realizing that the gigantic sword ball was destroyed by a single strike from her, the black armored figure told the soldiers he was taking back his previous words and now needed them to attack the castle. He removed his mask and ordered them to send a message to the other branch heads. While he fought Zoe, they should focus all their efforts on breaking the wall, and in case he lost, they needed to be prepared. Firmly holding his sword, he started moving toward the castle. The soldiers on the roof of the castle realized the enemies had Rami on their side, and their power was significantly greater than that of normal humans. They were a bit scared, wondering if the Rami from their side lost, they would have to fight them, so they rooted for Zoe to win the fight. The enemy soldiers began advancing toward the castle to attack, surrounding it as the war commenced. Mura and the other Rami observed the soldiers fighting and thought they held the advantage for now. Meanwhile, Ryuka was trying to spot mangonels, but Mura informed him that they had siege towers instead, though there were only 4 of them. Mura remarked that it felt like they were going to spend a few days starving there, and asked Ryuka if he was okay with that. Ryuka replied that he was already used to it. While sitting at the table, the Pope mentioned that this time they had Zoe, and it was her performance that would decide the outcome of the entire battle. He added that he didn't expect the battle to last very long. Ryuka thought that it should be even harder to breach the walls with so little time, yet the enemy chose to lay siege. He wondered if they were so confident that their Rami would defeat Zoe, or perhaps the Empire had something else up its sleeve. Suddenly, a blast destroyed part of the castle wall, leaving everyone shocked and wondering what had just happened. Ryuka and Miura looked down to see what caused it, and Ryuka thought it felt like a hit from a catapult, though he hadn't seen any such weapon. Confused, Ryuka asked what it was. The Pope explained that it looked like the work of Aramis and felt like Aramis had just used its power. He suggested the enemy had another Aramis with him after all. Ryuka expressed surprise that the Pope could sense Aramis' power. The Pope then asked Demi if she had found the other Aramis. With her hand over her eye, Demi was scanning the faces of every Empire soldier and said it would take a few more hours. Suddenly, they felt another huge blast on the wall. Ryuka, stressed, thought that at this rate, it wouldn't even take 30 minutes for the wall to give in. The Pope looked at Ryuka and said it seemed like his turn had arrived. He informed Ryuka that the enemy ranks contained around 3,000 soldiers and ordered him to find the Aramis and eliminate it. On the other hand, Zoe and the enemy Aramis were fiercely fighting each other. Zoe attacked with her weapon, but the enemy Aramis successfully defended against her strikes. They exchanged powerful blows, each strike generating tremendous force. Zoe swung her sword at the enemy Aramis, but he blocked it, causing the sword to strike the wall, resulting in a huge blast. Zoe then wielded her needle sword and leaped to throw it at the enemy Aramis, but he defended with his shield and threatened to kill her. He used his power to hurl the needle back at her, but she deflected it, causing another blast against the castle wall. The enemy Aramis smirked, thinking that even the power in the needles wouldn't work, and considered retreating. As he pondered this, Zoe noticed a drop of blood on her hand. She stared at it, wide-eyed, and her face turned sad. She wiped the blood away, but it reappeared, making her feel even sadder. Suddenly, she began crying loudly, confusing the enemy Aramis. She wiped her tears and prepared to fight with her bare hands. Suddenly, the enemy Aramis felt a surge of power in the air. Lightning crackled, causing all the surrounding swords to gather together. Zoe formed a gigantic ball of swords, much larger than the one created by the enemy Aramis, and attacked him with it. All the soldiers were bewildered by the power in the air. With that powerful attack, Zoe finally defeated the enemy Aramis, leaving him on his knees. She went to him while looking at her hand, and she sadly showed her hand to him and said it started bleeding, looking at him with confusion. The enemy Rama said he was bleeding too, much more than that. Meanwhile, Ryuka and the other Rami were confused as they felt another attack on the wall. Ryuka wondered how the enemy was attacking them, and Demi suggested they make an assumption and try to deduce the method of attack. She asked Ryuka to tell her if she saw anything unusual so she could focus on her probing there. Ryuka looked at her in confusion, but then he noticed that the archers were the ones launching the attacks. Among the archers, he spotted another Ramus preparing for another strike. While the battle raged, the soldiers inside the castle murmured among themselves, questioning why they were fighting. One soldier wondered if it was for money. He explained that he fought so he could enter the tower when he died, believing the tower welcomed devout souls, and to be devout meant protecting it. He asked another soldier if he didn't want to enter the tower since it fulfilled every desire. However, he admitted this could only be achieved after death, so he couldn't really decide what he wanted while alive. He remarked that life was a miracle, and living solely for the sake of after-death salvation felt like a waste. He added that if there were something more immediate, like women or booze, it might be different. The other soldier agreed as they noticed the enemy's attacks on the wall. The enemy archer Ramus continued to attack the wall, causing it to weaken and crumble. Ryuka observed that their Ramus was using arrows, noting that longbows weren't typically effective against castle walls. He speculated that the Ramus must be among the archers, firing arrows in all directions to conceal the special ones meant for destroying the wall. Ryuka planned to come up with other theories, but Demi interrupted, saying she had finally located the Ramus among the archers. Ryuka informed Poppy that he would show her the person, to which Poppy nervously agreed, expressing concern about her ability to do so. Poppy shot an arrow and someone covered the Ramus. Demi mentioned that the next arrow was on its way, prompting Ryuka to ask if she couldn't use her power to alter the trajectory of the special arrows. Poppy explained that she could only manipulate the object she had touched at least once. Suddenly, a blast occurred nearby, and Ryuka pointed out that they were now being targeted. He asked Poppy if she could aim at the arrow itself. Poppy tried and shot the arrow into the air. Meanwhile, the enemy Ramus also shot an arrow, and their arrows collided, canceling each other out. Ryuka exclaimed with excitement that she did it, and Poppy confirmed it enthusiastically. Ryuka pondered how they would deal with the archer Ramus next. He considered sending soldiers from the gate to take out the Ramus, but realized it wasn't a good defensive strategy. Poppy shot another arrow, but admitted that she missed this time. The enemy archers intensified their barrage, making it difficult to identify the special arrow. Demi warned that it would be challenging for Poppy to deflect the special arrow now. She urged them to hurry and kill the Ramus before his arrow reached them. Ryuka asked Miura if he could do something about it. Miura questioned if Ryuka wanted him to bring that bastard's head. Ryuka confirmed it, and with a smile, Miura said he would do it. Ryuka cautioned Miura that he would have to run through the battlefield, emphasizing that it would be more dangerous than before. Miura expressed confidence, stating that he had something worth fighting for now. Despite his fear, he declared that he was capable of handling it. The Pope requested Miura to bring the Ramus back alive. Miura smiled at him and said he would try, then jumped off the castle wall. Ryuka blew the horn to illuminate the spot with a beam of light, confusing the soldiers. Miura, moving at the speed of light, dashed through them like a flash. Poppy also shot an arrow, but it broke as she noticed the enemy Ramus had increased its weight. The Pope observed this and realized that the enemy Ramus could alter the weight of objects. Demi advised the Pope to step back as it was dangerous. Miura continued running through the enemies, dodging arrows, and caught the arrow midair that Ryuka had given him after Poppy touched it. In just a second, Miura captured the enemy Ramus, who silently apologized to another Ramus named Kar. Miura brought him back alive to the castle roof, and then threw the arrow and leaned against the wall, covered in sweat and breathing heavily. With a smile, he announced that he had brought him back alive as requested. Ryuka looked at him proudly and expressed his appreciation. On the other hand, Zoe looked at the enemy Ramus, Kar, who was covered in blood. She mentioned that she was bleeding, and he responded that he had been bleeding for over an hour. Zoe asked him why they attacked, and he admitted he enjoyed praise and wanted to be remembered fondly after death. He revealed their admiral's desire to crush every tower except theirs. Kar, on his knees, explained that they were sent to eliminate their bugle Ramus, which brought them to this confrontation. The enemy Ramus then proposed that Zoe come with him so they could go home and avoid further bloodshed. Zoe, looking at him, remarked that she couldn't see his face clearly, perceiving it as a stone. Suddenly, an arrow needle arrived, which Kar caught, but Zoe grabbed his leg, questioning if he was trying to flee. Kar smirked and joked that he was just heading to the toilet, but an arrow aimed at Zoe, which she managed to catch until it unexpectedly increased in weight, caused her to lose grip of Kar. Kar sat on his horse and rode away, his soldiers checking if he was alright as they retreated. Zoe watched them leave. The Pope noted the retreat and mentioned Zoe's failure to capture her opponent. He asked Poppy if she could shoot the other Rammus, but her arrow fell short and she couldn't control it. The Pope explained that the area must be where the diocese ends, prompting Ryuka and the other Rami to question what diocese meant. The Pope realized he hadn't explained it to the newcomers and clarified that the powers of their branches were only effective within a certain proximity of the tower. The tower emitted an invisible force that, when received by the Rami, allowed them to manifest their powers into their respective abilities, explaining how their branches functioned. He further revealed that the diocese constitutes the area in which the tower's force is emitted. He assumed that this castle must be located on the diocese's border, and mentioned that the Papal State's border should follow the diocese's border. He also speculated that the Empire was likely aware of this when they fled. Ryuka, standing there, thought it would have been nice if they had known about it earlier. However, the Pope pointed out that not only did they capture the Empire's Rammus, but they also learned that Zoe would be useful against even the Empire's strongest soldiers. He considered this battle a triumph. The Pope then ordered Ryuka to sound the victory call. Ryuka looked at the sky, pondering this, and then he held his trumpet and blew the horn, signaling their triumph to everyone. As the soldiers scavenged the battlefield, they searched the dead bodies for loot. The ground was littered with the bodies of enemy soldiers. One soldier, while searching, asked if they found anything interesting yet. Another soldier shook their head and noticed that two bodies had the same face. At night, Ryuka and Miura stood together on the mansion's roof, eating food while looking down. Ryuka noticed Oscar standing in front of the Pope, and Miura mentioned soldiers passing by earlier who had said something to him. Ryuka inquired about it, and Miura explained that they wanted to see his branch. He recounted how one soldier even touched it and expressed gratitude, finding the situation bizarre. Miura reflected on how he used to be ostracized because of this, but now it was seen as an honor. Ryuka gazed at the sky, lost in thought. Suddenly, they witnessed a huge blast on the other side of the mountains, leaving them shocked and wondering about the cause. Miura dropped the bread in his hand in surprise. Ryuka was puzzled by the event, and just then, Demi arrived, breathless, urging Ryuka in a panic to sound the retreat signal and evacuate everyone from the tower. Ryuka, still confused, asked what had happened, and Demi explains that the Garland had launched their attack. They noticed something piercing through the night sky as the situation intensified. Some of the villagers were having a celebration for the first harvest in their house. As they happily enjoyed themselves with family, they heard a knock on the door. One of the villagers opened the door and asked who it was. The soldier told him to pack up his belongings and informed him to evacuate. The villager asked the reason, and the soldier told him to hurry up, as there wasn't much time before it struck. The villager wondered what he was talking about. Meanwhile, the civilians started packing their belongings, and Ryuka was standing on the roof of the castle, blowing off the horn and giving signals to everyone. The soldier told the captain that their army was ready to advance, and they were also ready to issue the evacuation orders to nearby civilians. The captain told them that according to those Rami, the Garland would strike nearby, and that the hit was supposed to strike these vicinities. The time until impact should have been around 20 minutes. The Pope informed Ryuka and the other Rami around that they would use the remaining time to march to the old trenches a mile ahead. The carriages were for provisions and the wounded only. The rest went by foot. Ryuka asked if the horn he blew was good enough, and the Pope appreciated him, telling him that because of him, they evacuated everybody real quick. Demi, standing there, was using her ability, and Miura asked if she could see the Garland's attack. He asked if they hid in the trenches, shouldn't they be safe from it? But she told him she didn't know the destructive power of that thing. Miura said then they might be in trouble, but still, they must try to run away from it. Poppy, sitting there, wished that she was immortal. After a while, they started going from there on the carriage, and Ryuka asked the Pope how long he was going to keep them in the dark, and questioned what exactly would strike. The Pope said he wondered where he should begin. He started explaining that in order for them to understand the nature of the Garland's attack, they must first grasp the concept of space. He revealed that the Garland used such material in space, and space is like an infinitely vast night sky. So in its expanse, the stars and rocks, both big and small, floated. And by drawing it closer from space and striking at the Earth, a rock which falls from space, a meteor, they call it. Hearing that, Ryuka was a bit shocked as he was not expecting it. Meanwhile, the civilians sat side by side in a covered space. Ryuka noticed a small child being held by a woman and felt a bit sad. Suddenly, a meteor struck beside the mountains surrounding the castle, causing massive destruction in its wake. The impact obliterated everything from birds to trees, vanishing it all within seconds. After the chaos subsided, they emerged from cover to survey the devastation. The strike had even destroyed the large mountains, leaving villagers and others saddened as they thought about their farms. Their once sheltered farms, nestled within the mountains, were now exposed, with a huge hole in the ground marking where the meteor had struck. Ryuka himself was completely shocked, his eyes wide open after witnessing such a catastrophic event. 2 days later, in the papal state's capital of Terami, the Pope gathered all the Rami around, studying a map as they planned their next steps. The Pope began by recounting the recent events, mentioning the Garland's ability to summon meteors with immense destructive power, capable of destroying smaller nations in a single strike. He explained that the Garland's range allowed him to target the papal state even while he remained within the empire's borders. The Pope then delved into the Garland's weaknesses. Firstly, like other Rammus, the Garland couldn't use his abilities outside his tower's domain, known as the diocese. Pointing at the map, the Pope illustrated that while the Garland could attack a target outside his diocese from within, the accuracy and power of the meteor strikes decreased with distance. This is why the meteor strike had missed Terami, as it was further from the Empire compared to Canoli Castle, which fell within the Garland's range. Secondly, the Pope noted that the Garland needed time to store energy before unleashing his attack. Although the Garland had destroyed 3 countries thus far, there had been a 1-month interval between each strike. These weaknesses offered some hope and strategy for countering the Garland's devastating power. Ryuka asked if this meant they had a month until the next attack. The Pope affirmed this, summarizing that if the Garland were to target the papal state, it would bring Terami within its range. To protect their country, they needed to prevent the Empire from invading. The Pope emphasized the need for both defense and offense, proposing that they break into the Empire and eliminate the Garland themselves. They would use the remaining month to search for a Rammus capable of countering the Garland's meteor attack. The Pope assured the Rammus that details would be revealed later, urging them to take care of themselves until then. Before leaving, the Pope informed everyone that he would grant them leave tonight and that they were free to take a walk. He complimented Ryuka, saying he had proven his worth, and suggested he relax and feast with everyone tonight. Hearing this, Ryuka went to join the party with the other Rami. At dinner, they sat at a table covered with a variety of delicious cuisines, holding their drinks and cheering with each other, celebrating their victory at Canoli Castle. Zahid was the most excited, which annoyed Demi a bit, because Zahid hadn't done much in the fight, but was acting like he was the one who made them win. Zahid looked at Ryuka with a smile and introduced himself, explaining that they wouldn't see him often on the battlefield, but asking them to believe that he was also a Rammus. Everyone looked happy except Demi, who seemed a bit annoyed as usual. Ryuka asked Zahid why he didn't see him during the battle. Zahid explained that his ability wasn't really suited for combat. He considered himself just lucky, no more or less. To illustrate, he gave an example. He might stumble upon a box of exquisite spices in the forest, or perhaps a dame he bravely rescued from some scoundrel might turn out to be a wealthy merchant's daughter. He said his power came in pretty handy often, but wasn't very flexible. Zahid mentioned he was currently tasked with making the Rammus uniforms, which were like good luck charms. Ryuka listened carefully as they finished drinking their booze. Zahid pointed out that Ryuka had it tough, especially considering his age and dream of becoming a musician. Ryuka then asked Zahid why he was working for the Pope. Zahid showed him a card and explained that he had spent too much money while gambling. The Pope paid off his gambling debt in full, and working for him was how Zahid repaid that debt. Meanwhile, Kura made a cut on her hand, which started bleeding, and she asked Ryuka to give her his hand with a smile. Ryuka noticed her bleeding hand and asked in shock what the hell was wrong with her. She suggested that they all share the pain from her cut to commemorate the day. They noticed she was drunk, and Demi angrily told her not to spill blood on their food. Looking at a small cut from Kura, Ryuka, feeling drunk, put his head on the table along with Miura and Zahid. He confessed he was unsure about his future, and he couldn't believe that he made a promise to kill the Garland. He explained that he had only come here to practice playing the bugle and had no idea he would be forced to fight a monster like that. In his drunken state, he admitted that he initially thought he didn't need to care about the Garland and the Empire. But when he saw that huge meteor strike, he realized it was impossible for him to not care. He expressed that just the thought of it scared him. Zahid, also drunk, told Ryuka he knew exactly how he felt. Even though he had never seen a meteor before, he still understood. Miura was passed out on the table. Ryuka asked if he also felt the same, then suddenly realized there were no girls at the table. Confused, he asked where the girls had gone, and Zahid told him they had gone home a while ago. Ryuka looked down toward the main hall, where a woman was sitting on a chair with her baby. Zahid, holding Miura, suggested they go to the bathhouse. Annoyed, Ryuka wondered why. With a smile and excitement, Zahid explained that sometimes they all need to take a step and not overthink things. He said that relaxation is the best way to hype themselves up for work and urged them to go. Together, they walked toward the bathhouse. As they reach the bathhouse, Miura and Ryuko both lay on the floor. The bathhouse attendant noticed Zahid and pointed out the last time he showed up, he had fun with one of their ladies and tried to sneak away without paying. Zahid stood there silently, a bit embarrassed. Ryuko asked if this was not supposed to be a bathhouse. Zahid explained that it is a bathhouse where they can bathe with women. He then told the attendant it wasn't his fault and that they added an option he didn't even order. While looking at Miura, Ryuko noticed his tooth was chipped. The attendants held Zahid and asked him to pay whatever he owed or else his friends could. Meanwhile, many people standing there looked at them and laughed, wondering if it wasn't the legendary Bugle Boy himself. They also wondered if the folks with him were Rami too. Ryuko asked the boys who they were. They responded by asking if he didn't remember them from his company during the battle at the beach. Confused, he admitted that he didn't recall them. One of the boys then asked if everything was all right. In the next scene, they were sitting naked in bathtubs. Zahid was hoping for a private bathroom with a lady while the others were chatting. They talked with Ryuko about the stars and mentioned that some soldiers had said those lights were the most beautiful things they had ever seen. Hearing such compliments, he smiled a bit, and the men told him they were looking forward to seeing him create those lights again. After they finished their bath, they said goodbye to each other. Ryuko and Zahid, who was lifting Miura, walked towards the castle. Zahid wondered aloud if their lives meant nothing, which confused Ryuko. He asked Zahid if he was alright. Zahid replied that he would prefer going to a bathhouse over going into space, questioning the purpose of gazing into space when he could gaze at girls. Ryuko remained silent at this. When they finally reached the castle, the Pope welcomed them and asked Ryuko if they could talk. After that, they went to the balcony, and the Pope asked Ryuko if he enjoyed the party. Ryuko, not showing much enthusiasm, replied that it was pretty fun. The Pope expressed his happiness to hear that and mentioned that he had hoped Ryuko would have mustered the courage to defeat Garland. Ryuko remained silent for a while before confessing that he had always thought that there was nothing redeemable about the world. He wondered if the piling up of corpses ever mattered, as he believed everything would remain the same until he faced it head-on. He then revealed his cut and shared his thoughts about whether things might not be as bad as he had always believed, especially after seeing the happy men in the bathhouse. The Pope listened silently as Ryuko continued, saying that maybe playing the bugle wasn't the only fun thing in the world, and that there might be many enjoyable things worth doing that he didn't know about yet. He wondered if he could do anything to help with dead bodies piling up everywhere. The Pope told him to look at the sunrise, pointing out the beautiful birds flying and the magnificent sight before them. While looking at the sunrise, Ryuko said he had made up his mind that when they faced Garland, he would give it his all. He said he would do it if that was what it took to enjoy some ale or a visit to the bathhouse, including the ones with the ladies. The Pope, curious about Ryuko's intentions, expressed how glad he was to see Ryuko in such good spirits and mentioned that he had some good news regarding the next step of their plan. Ryuko wondered if they were going to look for a Rammus that could counter Garland and asked if he was right. Without saying anything, the Pope handed him a mirror and asked him to put his head into it. Ryuko looked at it confusedly at first, but the Pope instructed him to submerge his head as if he were washing his face. Ryuko did as he was told, and when he put his head into the mirror, he saw a different land filled with people. The Pope explained that it was the Kingdom of Gallia, also known as the Land of Mirrors, and the person they sought was the Mirror Rammus, who was somewhere in that land. Ryuko was really excited, looking happily at the other side of the mirror, realizing that wonders beyond his wildest dreams awaited him there. Inside the castle, Cola asked Zoe if she had just woken up and informed her about the party, mentioning that they had a lot of fun. Meanwhile, in the summer of 1294, in the Kingdom of Gallia, the Pope was telling Ryuko that compared to the 300 soldiers, the enemy had around 500. Demi added that they came by sea and had no choice but to accept their inferior numbers, and informed Ryuko that it might be the time to display their prowess. Ryuko agreed and blew the trumpet. Before arriving at the castle, the Pope had been briefing all the Rammus about the Kingdom of Gallia. He revealed that Gallia had a tower, and their national hero was the Mirror Rammus. He informed them that they would seek the Mirror Rammus' aid in defeating Garland, but also revealed some obstacles. Firstly, the Kingdom of Gallia was in the midst of a civil war. Secondly, their king had suddenly vanished a year ago. The Pope explained that the Mirrorists wanted the Mirror Rammus as the head of state, while the Royalists remained loyal to the king. He mentioned that he was a personal acquaintance of the King of Gallia, so the Royalists would favor them, but the Mirrorists might not be kind and could attempt to hinder their visit to Limoges. Therefore, he decided to bring only those capable of defending themselves in combat. He named Zoe, Demi, Oscar, Zahid, himself, and Ryuka. Zahid pointed out that he was useless in combat, but the Pope told him that he had Lady Luck on his side, noting that it was customary to bring a good luck charm when traveling abroad. Meanwhile, in the present time, they were facing enemy soldiers. The enemy soldiers were talking about how they had heard that the skill of a general was revealed in the beauty of the soldiers' formation. They stood aligned with the light waves of Ryuka. The enemy general acknowledged that their formation may be pretty, but he deemed everything else about them as amateurish. He explained their plan, stating that according to their line formation, they were as good as they were. After stopping the cavalry advance, their cavalry would hit the flanks, and those bastards would regret stepping foot inside Gallia. After that, the battle started, and the Pope's soldiers split into two. The enemy general was shocked to see this, realizing their plan was to hit his cavalry's flank. The enemy also signaled their soldiers while Ryuka blew his trumpet, giving signals to their own troops. The enemy soldiers were stunned to see their formation change while advancing, transforming from a line formation to a powerful wedge. The general looked at their Rammus, who suggested sending them in, as only a Rammus could defeat a Rammus. The general told him that he was counting on him. The Rammus addressed the criminals they held, stating that they had no choice but to use them for the sake of the mirror. He further told them that their sentences might be reduced based on their performances. One of the prisoners remarked that it seemed like the rumors were true that Rammus had been vanishing one after the other. The general told them that it was their choice: remain in prison forever or earn their freedom in battle. They also had 4 Rammus: the Weapon Rammus, the Arm Rammus, the Empath Rammus, and the Invisible Rammus, each with their own special abilities. The Mirror Rammus reminded them that they were a team, and then they joined the battle. The Weapon Rammus fought with soldiers but was caught within a few minutes after he ran out of knives and before he could craft new ones. The Arm Rammus extended his arms 13 meters in combat, but had them cut in between and was defeated. The Empath Rammus arrived with a team of animals, but Ryuka's signals had already coordinated soldiers, resulting in the Empath Rammus' defeat as well. Meanwhile, the Invisible Rammus tried to attack Zahid from behind with a sword. Zahid was seeing Ryuka's lights for the first time and was impressed. Suddenly, the Invisible Rammus fell to the floor, slipping on an arrow and falling on his own sword. In this way, they defeated all the Rammus and secured victory. The Pope wondered if the rumors about the Rammus of that kingdom vanishing were true. He ordered Ryuka to assemble the soldiers and take a break before departing. They left soon after, hoping to reach their first stop before sunset. After that, they reached the fortified city of Kakasun. The Pope informed them that the land around here was ruled by the royalists and that they would similarly stop by a royalist government town the next day as they marched to the capital. Ryuka noticed that the place was full of mirrors. The Pope explained that the Mirror Rammus, as the name implies, had powers that involved mirrors. They could bind 2 mirrors to function as gates, transcending physical space. He further revealed that once a mirror was made into a gate, it remained a gate even when separated from its creator. As they walked, Ryuka overheard some strangers talking about mirrors. They continued and saw people with flowers around. The Pope mentioned that the city was likely celebrating midsummer, as everyone was wearing garlands and dancing together. Zahid, with a flower wreath on his head, sarcastically remarked to Oscar that they had come at the right time. However, Oscar reminded him that they were not there to enjoy themselves. Afterward, they went to their resting place at night. The Pope told them that he would meet them tomorrow, but he warned them to be careful outside and not expose themselves by wearing a hood or garland. He explained that while the existence of Rami was well known in this country, being found out would bring a lot of trouble. He further instructed Ryuka that if he decided to partake in the day's festivities, he should bring someone as his bodyguard. Demi declined, saying she hated crowded places. Ryuka looked at Oscar, who was doing push-ups, and responded that Ryuka shouldn't expect him to go. Ryuka noticed that Zahid had already gone to the nearest brothel, leaving only Zoe. So he took Zoe with him, telling her that they had to stay close. She noticed the mirrors on the wall and called them pretty. He asked her why she didn't buy one since they had received paychecks from the Pope. She replied that her mother took care of all her money. Realizing she was mentally like a 9-year-old, he wondered where her mother was and if her family lived inside a mansion. He bought the mirror for her, and she thanked him while looking at it. He asked her to hold his hand so she wouldn't wander off on her own. She looked at their reflection in the mirror from a different angle, but didn't notice much. Then they went to see the food. Zoe exclaimed that it looked delicious and kept complimenting different dishes as they walked. She decided to play a game where only children under 12 could participate. There was a brief heated argument when Zoe insisted she was a child. Ryuka managed to handle the situation and the other man stopped his daughter as well. Afterward, Ryuka stood with a man who apologized on behalf of his daughter and asked if Ryuka was there for the festival. Ryuka agreed and asked if the man was also there for the festival. The man confirmed and explained that one of his friends had told him about the fun festivities happening there. He revealed that the festival was meant to celebrate the fertile lands and the blossoming of the Rami. Ryuka, puzzled by the term blossoming, mentioned that he had never heard it before. The man explained that it referred to flowers blooming on a ramish branch, symbolizing their next level or growth. He added that the garlands were meant to symbolize their prayers for the blossoming. As Ryuka pondered this, the man's daughter appeared, proudly showing off the prize doll she had won. Ryuka noticed her face was also covered, and Zoe came back to join him. Zoe said that she wanted to try the game again, but Ryuka told her she had played enough. They then stood together, watching people worship the branches below. Ryuka asked how she ended up working for His Holiness. Zoe explained that she was just doing what her mother told her to do. She revealed that her mother was the one everyone called His Holiness, leaving Ryuka completely shocked. Zoe then asked if he wanted to become a musician. He then agreed, and she asked what musicians did. Ryuka explained that musicians did many things. Zoe said she also wanted to become a musician when she grew up. She listed other things she wanted to be, like a baker, a florist, a toy maker, and an artisan. She confessed that she wasn't sure what she wanted to be. Ryuka assured her, telling her that she could be anything if she put her mind to it. As they talked, they noticed the civilians lighting the bonfire. After watching for a while, they went back to their bedrooms. Zoe lay on her bed, staring at the mirror and remembering a time from her childhood. She recalled asking her mother what she should be when she grew up. Her mother had gently discouraged her from following in her footsteps, explaining that she was a concubine, a role that wasn't as glamorous as it seemed. She suggested that Zoe consider other professions, like becoming a baker or a florist. Zoe had always wanted to do something different, but had never been able to decide. Before she knew it, she had been dragged into the current situation. Zoe asked her mother if once they escaped, she could become a baker. Her mother reassured her that she could be anything if she put her mind to it. Zoe imagined all the places they could go and all the things they could do together. Unfortunately, nearby soldiers overheard their conversation. They stormed in, mocking her for thinking she could escape. They declared that her time as the castle lord's companion was over, and that now she would be entertaining them. They even suggested that she train Zoe for the same fate. Zoe fell asleep beside her mother, clutching her hand, unconscious of the harsh world around them. 17 years later, when Zoe finally woke up, she looked into the mirror and saw her mother dressed differently, greeting her with a smile. Her mother asked Zoe if she would work for her beloved mother. Zoe agreed, recalling that every time she had killed someone, she thought about what she had once wanted to become. In the present, Ryuka's words, so similar to those her mother had spoken when she was a child, echoed in her ears, making her feel something different. The next morning, the Pope announced that they would be marching towards the capital, just as they had the previous day. He warned them to be prepared, as any mirrorist could show up at any time. Ryuka asked about the mirror Ramus, wondering if they could count on him or her for help. The Pope explained that, like the king, the mirror Ramus was currently unaccounted for. He had only learned this yesterday. Despite the mirrorist's claims, she had never attempted to claim the throne. 3 years ago, the mirror Ramus lost her only daughter, which seemed to rob her of her sense of purpose. Since then, she had vanished without a trace, leaving the hero who had once been unmatched seemingly spirited away. Zahid asked if they had any other business in the capital, then touched the mirror and suggested they could simply jump through it to reach their destination. The Pope explained that a mirror of such size would require the mirror Ramus to maintain constant focus to sustain it. Suddenly, Zahid began to be pulled into the mirror, calling out to the others for help. Demine noticed something unusual beneath him as the ground started to crack open, revealing a large mirror below. The Pope shouted for Ryuka to proceed to the capital. At that moment, a girl appeared with a small child and introduced herself, stating that if they wanted to see her, they should know that she was the mirror Ramus. In the past, during battles, the mirror Ramus had used mirrors to shoot arrows through and attack enemies on the battlefield, winning many battles with ease. On her final campaign, the general had praised her unmatched skills, and she felt it was too soon for her to retire. In the present, while inside her house, the mirror Ramus instructed her daughter to go outside so she could speak with her guests. Despite her daughter's insistence on staying, the mirror Ramus firmly told her to go out and play. Once her daughter left, the mirror Ramus confirmed that she was willing to cooperate in defeating Garland. She had used her mirrors to analyze all the moves and had summoned them for this purpose. Although she mentioned that the Pope had escaped, she assured them of her support. However, she had one condition. If they defeated Garland, she wanted to take his power for herself. The request shocked them. The Mirror Ramus explained that she was still researching on how to extract the Ramus power and wanted to make the Garland's power her own. She asked if they agreed to this condition. Demi pointed out that since Ryuka was the captain, it was up to him to decide. Meanwhile, her daughter was trying to overhear the conversation through the window. Ryuka took some time to consider the Mirror Ramus proposal. She offered them a room to discuss it further. As they gathered in the room, Ryuka asked for her thoughts on the matter. Oscar and Demi appeared, concerned about his holiness, while Zahid seemed distracted, admiring the Mirror Ramus allure. Ryuka questioned whether it was indeed possible to extract the Ramus's power. Demi replied that it was likely true, as she had heard His Holiness mention it, though he never explained the process. Ryuka suggested that they should not make any decisions without consulting the Pope and proposed postponing their decision. He reminded them that they had been brought there by force and expressed doubts about whether the Mirror Ramus would let them leave without conditions. He also noted that the Mirror Ramus' daughter had died 3 years ago, while Demi was observing a child through the window. Suddenly, the Mirror Ramus returned, disguised in a cloak, and asked for their help with groceries. She said if they liked the town, explaining that it was built on top of ruins and was like a maze underground. She warned them that it was easy to get lost down there. The daughter then remarked to Zoe that she was very tall. Zoe, puzzled, asked her age, and the daughter replied she was 9. Zoe was surprised to find they were the same age, which also shocked the girl. After they finished with the groceries, the Mirror Ramus invited them to a meal to show her gratitude. Her daughter mentioned that lunchtime was usually spent outside. Zahid wondered if she meant at a restaurant, but the Mirror Ramus used her powers to show them a different place, away from the crowds. To their surprise, she revealed that they ate lunch at the beach every day. Zahid remarked on the impressive scale of her powers compared to theirs. As Ryuka and the Mirror Ramus sat together, he asked if he could ask about something. She guessed he was referring to her daughter, as the Pope had mentioned her loss and subsequent grief. Ryuka realized that the Mirror Ramus had indeed been observing them all along. She explained that 3 years ago, while she was on the battlefield, her husband and daughter had been killed by bandits on a distant mountain path. She had been unable to protect them at the time. Ryuka asked if the child she had now was her real daughter, and she revealed that the king had revived her. Ryuka was stunned by this revelation. The Mirror Ramus told him that a year after her daughter's death, the king, whom she had served with, left the child in her care with little explanation. Though she was initially unable to believe it, the child resembled her daughter, retained her memories, and even acted like her. During her period of deep grief, the child had helped her, but over time, she noticed something was amiss. The girl did not grow, her hair remained the same length, and she quickly forgot new friends. Even more troubling, the wound she had sustained 2 years ago had not healed. Oscar suggested that it was as if time had stopped for the girl. The Mirror Ramus agreed, and Ryuka looked at Oscar in confusion. She admitted she didn't understand what the king had done or where he was, but she suspected that the child was not normal. Despite this, she wanted to protect her, which was why she sought the Garland's power. Ryuka asked if this was indeed her motivation, and she confirmed it. She further revealed that she wanted to protect her life with her daughter and that she sought the Garland's power to do so. She believed that possessing this power would eliminate her fear. She asked Ryuka if her reasoning made sense. Ryuka looked at her without saying anything. Afterward, they returned home where Zoe and her daughter were playing together. Watching them, the Mirror Ramus asked Ryuka if Zoe was alright. Ryuka wondered what she meant, and the Ramus explained that from observing them, she could tell that Zoe was different. She even believed that the Pope was her mother too. The Ramus asked if Zoe was truly alright. Ryuka admitted that he didn't know, but he thought that it was fine for Zoe to hold such beliefs if it helped her cope, even if it was a delusion. Zoe then invited Ryuka to join them in their play, and he did so for a while. At night, when everyone was asleep, the Mirror Ramus entered the house and went into the mirror. Demi, who was lying in bed, noticed her go inside. Once inside the Mirror Ramus apologized for being late and explained that she had guests and had to wait until everyone fell asleep. A girl was tied to the mirror, and the Mirror Ramus asked if she was fine and if she'd gotten used to living there. The girl confirmed that she truly meant what she had said in the past about stealing Ramus' power. The Mirror Ramus then gave her food and explained that this was why she wanted her to remain there until they figured out how it was done. Afterward, the mirror Ramus moved to another side where many mirrors were hanging. From each mirror, an arm was tied with a chain protruding forward. Demi, Zoe, and Ryuka stood there, hidden, trying to figure out what was going on. However, the mirror Ramus had already noticed them. She pointed out that Demi had better vision than most people, and that even her secret underground lair was not hidden from Demi. Since they had been caught, Ryuka decided to confront her, and the three of them moved forward. They noticed numerous Rami locked up there. Ryuka asked if it was their power that she sought all along. The mirror Ramus explained that Ramus' powers, like any other part of the body, weakened with age. Nowadays, it took her longer to activate mirror gates, so she needed to get stronger to protect the country. Ryuka then asked about her previous claim that she only wanted to protect her family and her daughter, instead of just a piece of land. The mirror Ramus countered by asking if she truly did now. This response shocked Ryuka, as he hadn't expected her to change her stance so abruptly. After that, she asked about her proposal. Ryuka responded that the garland's power was too deadly, capable of destroying the entire world if someone thought it was worth destroying. She assured him that she would never think of doing that, but Ryuka argued that it didn't matter because they couldn't predict who they might become. He firmly stated that no one should have that much power. Hearing this, she became angry, and suddenly a sword emerged from the mirror, piercing Zoe's stomach and injuring her. They rushed to her side to see if she was alright. At that moment, an earthquake began shaking the place, and the mirror Ramus disappeared. Zoe lay on the ground, struggling to move. Ryuka urged her to run and asked her to endure the pain. The trio started running while the mirror Ramus watched them through the mirror, her voice echoing around them. She claimed to be a kind person, explaining that she could have captured them from the start and had deliberately avoided vital spots when attacking Zoe. Ryuka told Demi he could hear her, but Demi told him to shut up and keep running. She said that even now she could kill them, and she threw a shard from above through the mirror, grazing Ryuka's shoulder and injuring him. The mirror Ramus told them she was restraining herself from killing them outright, insisting she was actually a kind person. Despite their injuries, they kept running, trying to find a way out. The mirror Ramus was watching their every move when she suddenly noticed that all the Rami that she had tied with chains were free. Zahid and Oscar were running, asking Demi for directions. They were the ones who had freed the Rami. As Demi guided them, the mirror Ramus realized their plan to split up and sarcastically remarked on how clever they were. The Rami were confused, wondering why they were free. One of them mentioned that someone had told them to run. Meanwhile, the mirror Ramus stood in front of them, holding a sword. On the other hand, Ryuka, Demi, and Zoe finally emerged from the underground and took a deep breath. Zahid and Oscar were there as well, and they greeted each other. Zoe, weeping, said they needed to leave the village and stay away from all mirrors for now. However, Ryuka told her they couldn't win by running away. Suddenly, a civilian appeared and asked if they were okay, noticing the blood on their clothes. Ryuka and Zahid saw the mirror Ramus in a nearby mirror, holding a sword and a Rami's skull. Stunned, they immediately began walking away and assured the civilian they were fine. They kept running but found mirrors everywhere, so they headed into the forest where there were no mirrors. Suddenly, a Rami with a mirror on her collar appeared and identified them as the ones who had saved the others. She said she needed to remove the collar, but her head abruptly split from her body and her skull fell to the ground. The mirror Ramus appeared before them, asking if they had thought they could remove a branch's power from a Rami's corpse. She acknowledged that they had outwitted her, but claimed that being a kind person, she would give them one more chance. Ryuka suddenly took out his trumpet and started playing with all his might. Villagers around saw the light wave, and even the mirror Ramus' daughter woke from her sleep, wondering what was happening. The mirror Ramus wondered if Ryuka's trumpet playing was some kind of signal or if he was trying to call people to their location, remarking that she wouldn't hesitate to kill. Suddenly, she heard her daughter, Catherine, calling her. She ran towards the door, and when she opened it, her mother stood there with a smile on her face. She told Catherine that she couldn't go outside at night. Catherine replied that she had a feeling her mother was in the forest. Her mother assured her, saying that she must be tired and that she would sleep right next to her. She then asked Catherine to come inside. As she closed the door, she realized that Ryuka had orchestrated this plan all along. Ryuka and his crew sat in the forest, feeling relatively safe. Demi mentioned that there were no mirrors within a 100-meter radius and that she couldn't detect any movement in the mirror's house. Zahid commented on the abundance of mirrors in the country and suggested they return to the Papal State for real this time, as he asked Ryuka. He pointed out that since the mirror Ramus didn't want to cooperate with them, there was no reason to stay. However, Ryuka suggested they go to the capital. Zahid asked if he was kidding, noting that their mission to recruit the Mirror Ramus had failed, so there was nothing left to do. Ryuka explained that even if they couldn't recruit her, they might be able to take her power. They only needed the power, not the person, and the Pope might know how to extract it. Therefore, they needed to meet the Pope, who might be in the capital as well. Oscar agreed, stating that if His Holiness was there, it would be worth going. Demi then informed them that their soldiers stationed in Kakasun had started moving towards the capital too. Suddenly, Ryuka noticed that Zoe had fallen asleep. He suggested they also take a short rest before looking for another village. After resting, they would head towards the capital. Meanwhile, at a cave, a man appeared and asked the Pope if it was proper for a king to loiter in a place like that. He mentioned that he had not seen him in a millennium, referring to him as his ancient foe. Before this, when Zahid and Oscar had not yet met the Pope, they had been sitting on a cliff with Oscar's younger sister, eating beignets. Zahid remarked that there must be tastier beignets outside the village and asked if they would like to come with him. Her sister asked Oscar for permission, and Oscar asked Zahid if it would be safe. In the present, as they walked through the forest, Zahid, feeling tired, asked Demi how much longer until they reached the battlefield. She told him they were almost there. Zahid pointed out that she had been saying that since the day before yesterday, so she told him not to ask anymore. He then asked Ryuka to throw another party when they got back to the Papal State and have a bath. Ryuka agreed but said they needed to make sure Zoe could join them next time. Zahid also asked Oscar if he wanted to join, but Oscar said he preferred to spend his free time with his sister. Ryuka looked a bit surprised as he hadn't known Oscar had a sister. Meanwhile, Demi announced that they had finally arrived. From the mountain, they could see the battlefield below. She explained that the people on the east side of the river were royalists, while the mirrorists were on the west side. Ryuka asked if the war was over Gallia's next successor. Demi confirmed this and explained that their goal was to rendezvous with the Pope. The only issue was that their rendezvous point, Limoges, was currently occupied by mirrorists. That was why the royalists were advancing towards Limoges to recapture the capital. Their plan was to join forces with the royalists and reach the capital together, with Demi taking charge of negotiations. She mentioned that, given the relationship between the Pope and this kingdom, they should at least be heard, as they were of the same kind after all. Ryuka asked about what she meant, and she explained that their commander was a Ramus just like them. When they finally met the leader Ramus, he acknowledged their situation and expressed surprise that they had managed to escape from the Mirror Ramus, knowing how formidable she was. Demi asked if they would fight together, to which he agreed, but on two conditions. Firstly, once they reached the capital, he wanted their assistance in reclaiming the tower, as the mirrorists were occupying it. The tower, a symbol of sovereignty, was crucial, and he could not allow the mirrorists and their revolting criminals, led by the Mirror Ramus, to possess it and usurp the throne. Secondly, he wanted their help on the battlefield to reach the capital. Standing atop the tower, he pointed out mirrorist soldiers across the bridge. He noted that while their numbers were few, their equipment was formidable. He showed them that the mirrorist swords were made out of mirrors and had the ability to cut through anything. These swords could forcibly transport whatever they touched to a different location. He referred to the mirrorist soldiers as leftover from the Mirror Ramus Special Forces when she was in her prime. Oscar asked if he wanted them eliminated, and the Ramus agreed. He explained that although he was also a Ramus, his powers were ineffective against those mirror swords. He demonstrated how he could create weapons by solidifying air, but the mirror swords bypassed the solidity of his weapons. The Ramus then asked if they accepted these two conditions, and they proceeded to sit at a table for a meeting to discuss them. Ryuka asked if the Mirror Ramus was unlikely to appear, given that she was hunting Rami. The Commander Ramus assured him that they had taken precautions by actively destroying all mirrors large enough for anyone to pass through. Since the Mirror Ramus had not publicly shown herself since her disappearance, he believed they were safe. Demi added that she had been keeping an eye on the Mirror Ramus since they left the village and had seen no signs of her pursuing them. Ryuka suggested they take a break until nightfall. Oscar then asked if it was true that the Mirror Ramus had lost her daughter. The Commander Ramus confirmed this, explaining that it was the reason the Mirror Ramus had disappeared. He was about to ask something further but decided against it. Zahid simply observed their conversation in silence. The next day, Zahid asked Ryuka if they could have a chat. When Ryuka asked what was on his mind, Zahid hesitated before speaking. He began by asking if Ryuka had heard about Oscar's sister. Ryuka confirmed he had, and Zahid revealed that he had seen someone very similar to Oscar's sister before. He explained that Oscar's sister had been resurrected by the Pope. Zahid shared that he and Oscar had been friends since before they met the Pope. Oscar and his sister Hannah lived in a remote area. and their only contact with the outside world was through Zahid's father, a traveling merchant. Zahid and Oscar's family got along well, and he noted that it probably helped that they both had branches of power. While Oscar had always been somewhat gloomy, it had only intensified recently. Zahid recounted how his relationship with his father changed as soon as his powers developed, and eventually the Pope found him. This led to a period where he could not see Oscar and Hannah. One day the Pope brought Oscar to him, revealing that their village had been attacked by rough mercenaries and Hannah had been killed during the attack. The Pope resurrected Hannah, but she did not grow normally and was not quite human. Despite this, Oscar believed that the resurrected Hannah was truly his sister, and he devoted himself entirely to the Pope. Zahid took a deep breath and said he wanted to help Oscar let go of his attachment to his sister. He had invited Oscar to various events, but Oscar had always declined, either waiting for a mission from the Pope or watching over his sister. Zahid wished for Oscar to live a life not only for the Pope or his sister, but also for his own sake. He asked Ryuka if his concerns made sense. Afterward, they crossed to the other side of the river where they were immediately attacked by the enemies. When a soldier aimed to kill a child, Oscar rushed to help, but a spear pierced him and the child. Despite his injury, Oscar stood up and began crossing the river. The enemies fired numerous arrows at him, but he took them all without stopping. His body was soon covered in arrows, and yet he continued to advance, shocking the soldiers with his resilience. Oscar fought valiantly. Zahid noticed he was not holding back, and Demi reminded him not to get distracted. She emphasized that their strategy relied on Oscar's efforts. Meanwhile, the Ramess had revealed that to nullify the mirror swords, they needed to destroy all the mirrors, as each mirror was connected to another. The real challenge was that mirrors were scattered throughout the city. Ryuko realized that they would need to destroy every mirror near any duct. Oscar volunteered to draw attention away from the mirrors. Ryuka agreed, and the rest of them would hunt for the mirrors. Demi said she and Zahid would handle the mirror destruction and asked Ryuka to stay with Zoe. Zahid also wanted to stay with Zoe, but Demi insisted they needed luck to find the mirrors. Following their plan, Demi and Zahid worked together in the ducts to destroy mirrors. Despite their efforts, the swords continued to function, so they moved to the next duct. Demi urged Zahid to get it right this time to help relieve some of the burden from Oscar. Zahid, hearing this, felt a bit disheartened. Before that, Ryuka asked Zahid if it wouldn't be better for Oscar to move on from his sister, suggesting that time might help him get over her. He wondered why Zahid cared so much. Zahid remained silent, prompting Ryuka to point out their branch powers. Ryuka speculated that these powers might reflect their wielders' personalities or experiences. Zahid was puzzled, and Ryuka explained that since Zahid's power allowed him to visualize sound, it seemed fitting for him as a musician. He noted that the Mirror Ramess power was well suited for a country full of mirrors. Zahid thought his own power worked similarly, as luck could mean different things to different people. Money, status, or happiness. He believed his power granted wishes from the heart, much like when Hannah died and he unexpectedly won a fortune. Ryuka asked if it wasn't related, but Zahid admitted he wasn't sure, as his luck has never worked in favor of others. He speculated that it might be because he was self-centered and advised not to rely too heavily on him. In the present, Oscar was fleeing from soldiers who pursued him relentlessly. He attempted to distract them, but the soldiers noticed that with each wound he sustained, his regeneration slowed. Meanwhile, Demi was preparing to attack with duct tape. Zahid questioned if there were too many enemies, but Demi asked if he could identify the unusual mirror. Zahid used his dice to get a number, and while he was doing so, a soldier appeared behind him, preparing to attack. Demi pulled Zahid out of harm's way, and they realized the soldier was from the Special Forces. Demi wondered if there were still others left. When the soldier attacked Zahid, his sword shattered into pieces. Zahid took a deep breath, and the soldier, astonished, saw that they had finally found the mirror. Before the soldier could strike again, Demi had already destroyed the mirror with her knife after checking the dice number. Demi pointed out that Zahid's power seemed to only benefit himself, and Zahid agreed, suggesting they should break the mirror and inform Oscar as well. Demi noted that Oscar was in a precarious situation, surrounded by soldiers and on his knees. One of the soldiers remarked that Oscar had made their situation difficult by destroying all the mirrors that the Mirror Ramess had provided them. As the soldier prepared to unleash his sword, he warned Oscar that he wouldn't survive outside the tower's range, revealing that they had prepared mirrors right outside the tower's borders, connected to the ones within. The soldier declared his intention to cut off Oscar's head and drop it into the mirror, leaving his remains for the pigs. Suddenly, Oscar sprang to his feet. biting the soldier and holding him. However, before he could do any significant damage, another soldier swiftly sliced off Oscar's head. Suddenly, Zahid appeared and, seeing Oscar's head, grabbed it and began running. The soldiers recognized him as a friend of the Ramis, started chasing him and firing arrows. Despite their efforts, Zahid managed to escape. As he continued forward, he encountered more soldiers, forcing him to pause briefly before resuming his flight. Then, lightning struck, causing the towers to start breaking apart. Zahid managed to evade capture with Oscar's head, which had grown considerably. Oscar warned him about a soldier closing in, and Zahid, frightened, saw the soldier approaching. Just then, the Ramis appeared with his army and commended Zahid for his efforts. He revealed that although they had not intended to mobilize, Ryuka had persuaded them to do so. The Ramis assured Zahid that they would handle the rest. Ryuka sat beside Zoe, observing her peaceful slumber, while Oscar and Zahid lay on the grass, gazing at the sky. Oscar broke the silence, asking Zahid why he had come to save him. Zahid hesitated, not immediately responding. Oscar continued, noting that Zahid's luck was unpredictable and that both of them could have been killed. Oscar confessed that Zahid cared too much about him, and that he already knew that his sister was no longer alive. Zahid's eyes widened in shock at this revelation. Oscar admitted that he had initially believed the child was his sister, but after 6 years, he recognized something was off. He had come to terms with his feelings, accepting that the child was not truly his sister. However, he was grateful to her and the Pope for saving him, and he resolved to live on in their honor. Zahid, moved by Oscar's words, promised that he would continue to invite him as much as he wanted. Oscar wondered about Zahid's sudden change in attitude. Zahid explained that it wasn't merely concern for Oscar, but a desire to enjoy life and have fun. He asked, with a hint of a smile, if having fun occasionally was such a bad thing. Oscar looked at Zahid differently but remained silent for a while. Then he said he would only agree if he could bring his own sister along. Zahid smiled at him. Just then, the Ramis appeared, informing them that they had crossed to the other side of the river and confirmed the Mirrorist's retreat. They were ready to pursue them. While sitting in a warm pool, Oscar asked Ryuka if it was true that he had convinced the royalists to help save them. Ryuka confirmed, and Oscar asked again if Ryuka had the resolve to fight for the Pope. Ryuka hesitated, but then said that compared to before, he had more resolve now. He explained that back then he only knew the life of a mercenary, but now he understood why they had to defeat the Garland. Oscar offered a handshake and apologized for trying to kill Ryuka before, assuring him that he wouldn't do it again. Ryuka shook his hand and thanked him. Meanwhile, Zoe slept with the mirror she had bought, unaware that the mirror Ramis was watching her through it. After some time, the mirror disappeared from Zoe's side, but she didn't notice as she had finally woken up. She looked around and saw tents everywhere, feeling a bit confused. Suddenly, Ryuka noticed her. She approached him, held his hand, and greeted him with a smile. Ryuka was a bit confused but didn't react differently. The Ramis came over and informed them that they had reached the capital while she was asleep and that they would soon join the assault. He further asked if she wanted to join Zahid and Oscar, who were resting in a nearby tent. He offered to explain more if she wanted. Zoe felt a bit sad since she had missed everything, but she nodded her head. The Ramis began explaining that to retake Limoges, which was currently occupied by the Mirrorists, they had been besieging the city for 2 months without much progress. Despite being fewer in number, the Mirrorists' mirror-based defensive capabilities were proving troublesome. He mentioned that there were a few machines that they had gotten from the Mirror Ramis, but even without those, the Limoges had always been nearly impregnable. He assured her that they were prepared for a prolonged siege and invited her to come along after their rendezvous with the Pope. Meanwhile, Ryuka asked Demi if she had found the Pope. She shook her head and said she had seen a few of the Pope's soldiers among those besieging the eastern wall, but not the Pope himself. Ryuka pondered this and wondered if the flowering guy might know something. Suddenly, a soldier appeared and asked if he was Ryuka, introducing himself as a messenger from the Pope. He said he had a message for them. Demi immediately urged him to speak. The messenger relayed the first message. The Pope wanted Oscar and Zahid by his side as guards. Ryuka realized this meant that the Pope was not planning to come himself. The messenger continued with the second message, revealing that to take the Mirror Ramis's power, they had to kill her. He further informed them that the Pope would handle obtaining the administration rights of the tower personally. He instructed them to join the siege and kill the Mirror Ramis. Demi thought it was just as she expected, while the Ramis commented that those were some significant orders. As he was about to say more, he suddenly noticed a huge mirror on the castle, and his expression changed drastically. Ryuka looked at his face and wondered what was wrong. Meanwhile, 2 men sat on chairs talking. One said the country was in a state of confusion because of others' actions. The second man replied that he didn't care and was done with his mission. The first man asked if he wanted to let all his hard work over the past 1,000 years go to waste. The second man admitted that was the problem. He might manage to claim a victory, but within 100 years, conflict would begin anew. He doubted they were getting any closer to the future they wished for, even if they were. He confessed he was simply tired of it all. The great purpose he once believed was worth everything now felt purposeless. The first man advised him not to fret too much and handed him a drink. The second man said he had hated him so much 1,000 years ago, but now he was like an old friend. They both took a drink, and the second man asked if it was all right to call him Francis. The first man, who was the Pope, nodded and said he was fine with it. Handing over the tower, he told Francis to consider it his retirement and said he would miss him. The Pope nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, on top of the castle, a big rock emerged from the mirror. Ryuko looked at it in shock, wondering if it was from a catapult. The Ramess speculated it might mean that she was there. Demi said she would share her vision, showing the mirror Ramess standing there, watching them. Ryuko wondered why she was there and asked if the attack was from her. The Ramess confirmed it and explained it was the mirror cannon, a weapon only she could operate. The mirror Ramess ordered her soldiers to prepare the next shot. They readied a new rock which traveled through multiple mirrors, increasing its velocity before emerging from the final mirror like a catapult and striking their position. Ryuko asked if it was really that bad. The Ramess confirmed it and told them that the mirror had to be destroyed. Even if they decided to retreat, they would suffer losses, and it would only take an hour to devastate their entire encampment. The Ramess requested help from Demi, Zoe, and Ryuka. Zoe sat on the ground, started weeping, and was scared. The soldiers asked the mirror Ramess if they should continue with the current strategy. She informed them that the angle was good and ordered them to keep shooting, saying it would draw the enemy out. Ryuko wondered what she meant, but she clarified that they would see their opponents coming out. The Ramess' soldiers also brought out their cannons to attack. Their shots were not very accurate. The enemy brought out more mirror cannons, and seeing this, Ryuko realized the situation was dire. The Ramess noted that, considering how the cannons work, that many should not work together at once. But he said until they destroyed all the cannons, their defeat was guaranteed. Ryuko thought about how much he hated weapons like these. With a bit of calculation, the battle could be over before it even began, reminding him of the past when his master used cannons. Demi offered to lend her vision, and Ryuko started blowing his trumpet, creating wave signals for their soldiers to follow. The soldiers of the mirror Ramess were shocked to see the signals. Following the pattern Ryuko created, their soldiers began hitting the castle. Within a few minutes, they managed to destroy all the mirror cannons. The mirror Ramess thought it was a shame Zoe wasn't there to help them, while the Ramess was happy and thanked Ryuko for his assistance. He ordered the soldiers at the front to withdraw and asked Ryuko to sound the retreat signal. Zoe watched everything from behind, while Zahid and Oscar, who had woken up, wondered about the crazy shaking in the ground. The Ramess, Ryuko, and Demi held a meeting in the tent. The Ramess stated that as long as the mirror Ramess remained, Limoges won't fall. Demi said they needed to kill her, mentioning it was His Holiness' orders. The Ramess wondered if they could accomplish it. Demi then asked Ryuko why he hadn't deployed Zoe. Ryuko was shocked by the question. Demi pointed out that destroying the cannons would have been an easy task for Zoe, and asked if it was because she was afraid of the mirror Ramess and if Ryuko was pitying her. He denied it, but Demi said it was fine to feel sorry for people. However, when she wasn't out there fighting, someone else was sacrificed, and that was the reality. Ryuko remained silent. Later, with many injured soldiers lying on the ground, Ryuko went to Zoe's camp. She was sitting on her bed when he sat down beside her. He thought about why he didn't want to force her. The last time she fought, it didn't bother him, but this time it took a lot of courage to ask. She looked at him as he called her name and requested her to fight for them and defeat the mirror Ramess. He explained that if they couldn't defeat her, they wouldn't be able to stop the Garland's next strike, and if that happened, the Papal State would be completely destroyed. He told her he couldn't ask anyone else but her. She looked at him, held his hand, and with a smile, told him to leave it to her. Ryuko was a bit confused. She reassured him, saying she would protect both her mother and him. Ryuko smiled, and as they walked out of the tent silently, he reflected on how much easier it was to run away back then compared to now. They walked towards their army, and Ryuko blew his trumpet, creating patterns in the castle. Zoe began moving in that direction. Ryuko asked Ramess if he was fine with him being in charge. The Ramess said he understood that soldiers under those lights must die, but their deaths wouldn't be in vain. He had seen Ryuko's magic lights before and trusted that he would lead them to victory. Ryuko smiled and assured him that they would handle the rest. In his mind, he knew he had to win. The infantry soldiers started attacking the enemy castle. As the gate opened, the Mirror-Ramus army stood ready with a mirror from which the Mirror-Ramus herself appeared. Zoe stood in front of her. The Mirror-Ramus, addressing Zoe, said she was fond of both her and Ryuka and offered them one last chance to surrender, promising to spare them if they did. Zoe, uninterested in the offer, donned her armor mask and declared that when they were done, their heads would be put on public display. A few days earlier in Kakasun, two men were having a conversation. One man said he wanted the other to eliminate the Papal State and the Mirror-Ramus. The other man replied that he must have fled from the Papal State and even lost Sarah, so he might be tight on troops. However, he showed that they were on a break and informed him that he had already done his part by eliminating the Ramus from Hispania. The first man told him not to argue with orders from the Empire. He said that if he succeeded, he would overlook the fact that he was wasting his time here. Then he mentioned an order for the little girl sitting on the chair, but she refused to talk to him, leaving him embarrassed. The man asked what the order for the child was. He was informed that once the mirror was disposed of, they wanted her to remain in this country, and with the Garland's power, they wanted her to strike the capital. The girl, looking out the window, asked if this country too, noting that she had enjoyed sightseeing, but now it felt truly unfortunate. In the past, when the Mirror-Ramus was young, she often gazed into a mirror, thinking she looked nothing like her mother. On her 12th birthday, she began working, and to commemorate the occasion, her mother gave her a mirror, saying it might help her look presentable. On her home island, the men were pirates and the women sold their bodies. To them, it was just the way things were. 2 years passed as she worked, and her younger sister was now old enough to start working too. However, her sister did not receive a mirror from her mother. On the day her sister bedded her first customer, their mother and sister abandoned her and left the island. Unlike her sister was not as pretty but bore a strong resemblance to their mother. The same night, her powers manifested. While she was in bed, a figure appeared and asked her about her desire. In return, she had to work for the figure. She expressed her wish to see her mother, and that was how she became the Mirror-Ramus. Zoe started running towards the Mirror-Ramus, who prepared for her attack. However, instead of striking her, Zoe passed by and killed 2 soldiers behind her. The Mirror-Ramus was puzzled, wondering what Zoe was doing. The Mother-Ramus appeared through a mirror and tried to attack Zoe, but she dodged the attack and killed 2 more soldiers. The Mirror-Ramus was baffled, knowing that Zoe was her only match. Why was she focusing on slaying the common infantry? Deciding to mirror Zoe's tactics, she moved into the soldiers and started killing them, leading both of them to slay each other's armies. Ryuka, Demi, and the Ramus were watching from their tower. The Ramus pointed out that everything was going according to his plan, as having Zoe and the Mirror-Ramus clash head-on was too dangerous. Ryuka explained to Demi that he wasn't saying this because he knew Zoe was scared. He emphasized that if they lost her, their defeat was certain. Even Zoe couldn't do much alone against the Mirror-Ramus. The Ramus asked if he was suggesting that Zoe shouldn't fight alone. Ryuka clarified that he wanted Zoe to first kill as many soldiers as she could. He noted that in large battles, the Mirror-Ramus was always followed by soldiers who held her mirrors. The Ramus agreed, acknowledging that reducing the number of mirrors would weaken the Mirror-Ramus. During the planning session, the Ramus asked who would fight the Mirror-Ramus if Zoe was busy fighting the infantry. Demi explained that he intended to use the infantry as bait. Ryuka apologized to the Ramus for the sacrifice of his soldiers, but insisted this was the best strategy they had. The Ramus asked whose soldiers would be killed first, and if the answer depended on Zoe or the Mirror-Ramus. Ryuka replied that it depended on who eliminated their soldiers first. While fighting, the Mirror-Ramus realized she couldn't match Zoe's speed in killing soldiers. She thought the worst case scenario would be if all her soldiers were killed, leaving no one to hold the mirrors for her. She realized that the innocent-looking boy, Ryuka, had devised a cunning plan. She suddenly retreated to the castle through a mirror and ordered the remaining soldiers to carry as many mirrors as they could. When asked who the target was, she replied that it was the enemy general, the young boy with a bugle. She instructed them that once the mirrors were in position above the soldiers, she would personally finish them off. The soldiers acknowledged her orders and prepared to carry them out. 19 years ago, the figure who granted her powers also provided her with a group of men under her direct servitude, known as the Mirror Special Force. He told her they could hold her mirrors and wield mirror swords, and assured her of their guaranteed loyalty. One of the soldiers mentioned that she had saved him from a dire situation in Arcanum 2 years ago, and he had been captivated by her strength and fighting style ever since. When she asked if he respected her because she was strong, the soldier confirmed, and she then walked away. Later, she went to her bed where her husband was sitting. She asked him why he married her and what he found worth marrying. He responded that it was love at first sight, and he had lost his heart to her beauty. When she asked if he liked her because she was beautiful, he agreed. She didn't say anything more. The next day while she was cooking, her daughter Isabella hugged her. She asked Isabella not to be clingy while she was cooking, but Isabella told her she loved her. She then asked Isabella what part of her she loved, and after a moment of confusion, her daughter said she loved her kindness. Hearing that, she told Isabella that she loved her kindness too. In the present, Demi informed them that their enemies had other plans. Using her powers, she saw several soldiers with cavalry and mirrors, realizing they were going to directly aim at them. The Ramis wondered if they were sure that they didn't need Zoe, noting that once the enemy's mirrors reached them, they would face defeat without her help. Ryuka reassured him, stating that he would let Zoe continue focusing on reducing enemy numbers. He promised not to call her until every enemy soldier on the battlefield was dead. Whatever attacks happened on them, they would handle the remaining soldiers. Demi then informed them that the enemy attack was coming from the right wing with cavalry and war weapons, and from the left wing with a large amount of infantry. As those soldiers started appearing, Ryuka blew his trumpet, signaling his soldiers. They immediately changed their formation, which shocked the enemy cavalry as they saw Ryuka's troops splitting up and covering more ground. Meanwhile, mirror wagons began to appear. They noticed that following the light seemed to make the wagons move faster. The Ramis explained that these mirror wagons were equipped with an outer shell of mirrors, making them nearly invincible. However, he reassured them that the trick he had mentioned before was still applicable here. Demi warned Ryuka not to mess up the timing as the wagons were moving precisely as they wanted them to. Suddenly, in response to Ryuka's signal, the soldiers threw a spear at the tires of one of the wagons. The spear caused the wagon to lift into the air and then break down. The Ramis expressed his happiness and praised them, but Demi reminded everyone not to relax yet, as the main forces were still approaching. As the forces drew closer, Ryuka began giving signals to his soldiers, who quickly formed a V formation and engaged in battle. One soldier remarked that he had been scared to go into battle before, but now he was enjoying it. In a short time, Ryuka's soldiers were gaining the upper hand. The Ramis praised Ryuka and asked what their next move would be. Ryuka responded that they would focus on eliminating the remaining archers. Demi then alerted them that the mirror Ramis was approaching. As she drew near, the Ramis wondered how she had arrived so quickly and whether she intended to climb the wall. Ryuka noted she was taking her time. A dying soldier apologized for not being able to do more, but the mirror Ramis thanked him and told him to rest peacefully. The mirror Ramis drew her weapon from the mirror, causing a wave of fear among the soldiers. Ryuka suggested that in the worst case, they might need to take the horses for their escape. The Ramis agreed, noting that they should make their escape immediately, as he had thought she would be unable to use the weapon due to the decline in her powers. The mirror Ramis asked the soldier if the weapon was still usable. He replied that it should last for one swing, but noted that there were not many branching mirrors left in reserve, and none had been produced since her retirement. She expressed frustration that Ryuka was more troublesome than she had anticipated, and declared that she would not hold back any longer. She raised her weapon, causing all the mirror sword pieces to gather around it, forming an ever-expanding mass. Ryuka, eyes wide with shock, asked if all those pieces were indeed mirror swords. Demi told him to remain silent and move quickly. The mirror Ramis, aware that she wouldn't be able to fully control the weapon, informed Ryuka that he was already within her range. She struck the ground with her weapon, but Ryuka managed to stay nearly safe from the attack. As she prepared to strike again, Zoe appeared from behind and attacked the mirror Ramis, knocking her to the ground. Ryuka observed that the mirrors were now normal. Demi noted that Zoe had arrived just in time, having already eliminated all the remaining soldiers. As the mirror Ramis lay on the ground, she recalled a painful memory from when her daughter was 5 years old. She had finally discovered where her mother and sister lived and had decided to visit them. When she arrived, they accused her of coming to kill them. She begged them, expressing that she didn't harbor any hatred for their abandonment and hoped that they could live together. However, her mother scolded and shouted at her, telling her to leave and calling her not a real daughter. Devastated by her mother's words, the mirror Ramis fell silent and left, unable to comprehend why her sister, who was stronger, prettier, and kinder, was favored over her. As time passed, the mirror Ramis' powers deteriorated and she retired. 3 years later, she lost her daughter and husband, feeling that she needed to be stronger, more beautiful, and kinder to be worthy of love. Yet here she was, reduced to this state, crawling toward a mirror. Zoe, standing over her, placed a foot on her hand and asked if she was trying to run away. The Mirror-Ramis, reflecting on the toll of the years and the countrymen she had killed, wondered what her future held. Her daughter's image appeared in the mirror, asking why she was there. Suddenly, her daughter emerged from the mirror and pulled Zoe aside, asking if her mother was all right. The Mirror-Ramis looked at her daughter's caring expression and felt that in the end, all she had was a replacement child. She questioned the worth of being loved by someone who was not real. She asked Isabel why she came to save her, to which Isabel replied that she loved her. The Mirror-Ramis then questioned what part of her daughter loved her, given that she was not even her real child. Isabel was shocked and asked if it meant her mother didn't love her own mother. The Mirror-Ramis was then reminded of her own mother and questioned whether she loved her own mother. After contemplating, she admitted she did love her, but when asked which part, she remained silent and she didn't know. Isabel pointed out that she was neither strong, nor pretty, nor kind, but continued to cry. Isabel asked if she understood how she felt, and the Mirror-Ramis, through tears, said she did. As she finally understood, a plant began to grow on her branch. Isabel noted her injuries, and the Mirror-Ramis reassured her that she was fine and could go home now. Zoe observed their exchange, and the Mirror-Ramis promised herself that she would not lose to anyone or anything. Suddenly, the Mirror-Ramis stood there, and Demi noticed the flowers blooming on her branch. She informed Ryuka, who was shocked to remember that the man had mentioned this as the Ramis next level. He wondered what would come next. Meanwhile, her daughter stood behind her, assuring her that everything would be alright, and that she would be back home. Her daughter then returned to the mirror and her home. As the Mirror-Ramis summoned her weapon from the air, she realized that even without a mirror, she could transcend space. Suddenly surrounded by soldiers, she effortlessly cut through them with a single strike, leaving many necks severed. Zoe watched in shock. The Mirror-Ramis, now fully aware of the power of flowering, knew that the human body could not fully control it, so she decided to end the battle quickly. The Mirror-Ramis immediately launched an attack on Zoe, who managed to dodge it. The air crackled with energy as the Mirror-Ramis struck again and again, with Zoe barely managing to defend herself. The surroundings were filled with cracks and destruction. Eventually, the Mirror-Ramis jumped into the air, landing a powerful strike that caused both her and Zoe to fall into a house, destroying it. In the middle of the chaos, their eyes met, and then Zoe jumped into the air, moving toward the Mirror-Ramis. A massive crack split the sky, but Zoe did not stop. She landed a decisive strike on the Mirror-Ramis, catching her off guard and knocking her to the ground. Ryuka watched in shock as the events unfolded before him. Demi and the other Ramis, equally stunned, could hardly believe their eyes. Meanwhile, Zoe approached the Mirror-Ramis, but suddenly a boy appeared from the side and asked if they were finished. He charged at Zoe, attempting to kick her. Despite Zoe's effort to block the kick, the boy managed to land a blow with his other leg, sending her crashing to the ground near the Mirror-Ramis. As Zoe lay there, struggling to maintain her strength, Ryuka rushed to her help. The boy prepared to press his foot down on Zoe, but the Mirror-Ramis, in her injured state, urged Ryuka to protect Zoe and be a good boy. As the boy was going to touch Zoe, the mirror cracked around him, and within moments, his hands were stained with the Mirror-Ramis blood. He walked away, leaving the scene. An orb emerged from the Mirror-Ramis' ear and it began to fly away. It traveled to a desolate area covered in old branches. There, the Pope picked up the orb and threw it into a mirror. A crack appeared in the surrounding area, and the Pope instructed the trees to ensure the orb's good use. Meanwhile, Oscar and Zahid waited below. Shortly after, the Pope reappeared with newfound power, and they noticed a crack behind him. They wondered if the power had been extracted from the Mirror-Ramis, and the Pope confirmed it. He then said they would be heading home. Zahid asked about the King of Gallia, and the Pope responded that he had returned to the tower, and everyone should be back in the papal state by now. On the other hand, Ryuka held Zoe in a state of shock. Suddenly, Zoe opened her eyes, smiled, and said that they won, having defeated the Mirror-Ramis. Ryuka clasped her hand and smiled back. She gently rubbed his face and told him that he had fought well. At that moment, Demi appeared and praised both of them. The Pope also arrived, announcing that the Mirror-Ramis powers had been secured and that their mission had been successful. Demi then introduced the Mirror-Ramis' daughter, who was curious about everyone present, and noted the Pope's unusually long head. Demi explained that when the Mirror-Ramis had sent them away, she had sent her daughter along as well. Just then, Ryuka's friend Miura came running with excitement. Ryuka greeted Miura with a smile, but suddenly he fainted. When Ryuka woke up, he found himself in bed with Miura sitting beside him. He greeted Miura and asked how he was feeling and if there was any pain. Miura reassured him, saying that Zoe was fine, sleeping soundly, and that everyone had made it back home safely. Miura also mentioned that the Pope promised to provide a replacement for the bugle Ryuka had lost. He continued, explaining that the Miraramis had died when she allowed their escape and that Empire soldiers had delivered the fatal blow. With both the mirror and the king dead, the Empire was now targeting Gallia, which was in the state of crisis. Ryuka inquired about the Miraramis daughter. Miura informed him that Guillaume, a cooperative Ramis from Gallia, was looking after her and would take her home. However, Miura was unsure about what to do with her, as she only wanted to reunite with her mother. Ryuka wondered why she had helped them escape. At that moment, Zahid burst in with excitement, inviting them to the bathhouse. Oscar commented on Zahid's impulsiveness and Ryuka with a serious expression, saying that he might not be able to join that day. Zahid mentioned that there was a party happening and that Oscar and his sister would be attending. Ryuka just gave Zahid a serious look, not giving a clear answer. A few days later, Zoe was preparing in her room when Ryuka appeared with a smile, asking if she was ready to go. She agreed and they held hands as they made their way to the party. Upon arriving, they were greeted by Ryuka's crew, who were enjoying a feast of delicious food. Miura asked about Poppy and Korra. Zahid explained that Korra was occupied with other matters and admitted he had no information on Poppy's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Oscar was trying to prevent his sister from indulging in too many sweets. Zoe, distracted by the potato on her plate, asked Ryuka to swap his meat for her potato, and they exchanged their dishes. Oscar pointed out Zoe to his sister, noting that she was the same age as her. His sister looked at Zoe in surprise, remarking on her mature size. She whispered to Oscar, suspecting Zoe might be lying about her age. Oscar quietly reassured her that Zoe was indeed as she appeared. Oscar then introduced Ryuka to his sister, mentioning that while he didn't have great respect for the Pope, he was not a bad person. Miura remarked to Ryuka that Oscar seemed to like him, and even Zoe had grown fond of him. He noted that Ryuka had a talent for winning people over. Zahid then asked Ryuka if he was romantically interested in Zoe. Zoe, taken aback, waited for Ryuka's response. After a moment of contemplation, Ryuka denied any such feelings, stating that Zoe was mentally a child and that he had felt nothing like that. Zahid pointed out that Zoe was 27 years old, but Ryuka remained silent, feeling confused and unsure in his thoughts. He reflected that he had never really had the chance to interact with women before, despite encountering many men who seemed overly excited at the mention of women. He admitted he didn't know how to express his feelings. Zahid asked if he wasn't at least interested in women, to which he replied that being interested wasn't the same as liking someone. He explained that his lifelong dream had been to become a musician, and he had never considered the possibility of romantic feelings, putting him at a loss for words. Miura then asked if Ryuka's life as a mercenary had been his only experience before joining their crew. He suggested that people evolve over time, and that Ryuka's feelings might change as well. Ryuka was lost in thought about his bugle when Miura questioned if it wasn't true that he deeply cared for Zoe. Zoe asked Ryuka directly if he didn't care about her, and Ryuka, though initially confused, eventually agreed. Zahid smiled, imagining that Zoe might react strongly if he suggested taking Ryuka to the bathhouse. Later, as Ryuka and Zoe walked through the castle, Zoe mentioned her dream of pursuing a different job. She had spoken to her mother about it the day before, but the Pope had told her it wasn't a suitable job for her. Zoe shared that her mother had said she was currently doing work that suited her best, and though she didn't hate her job, she accepted it because it made her mother happy. This revelation made Ryuka feel a bit sad, but he chose not to comment on it. Suddenly, the Pope called Ryuka over and announced he had bought a freshly made instrument. Zoe's excitement was palpable, and she moved to greet the Pope. However, Ryuka stopped her and asked the Pope to remove his helmet. He wanted to know the truth behind the flowering phenomenon, and to understand why Zoe considered him her mother. Ryuka insisted that the Pope must reveal his face. Ryuka and the Pope sat on the bench with Zoe sleeping peacefully on the Pope's lap. As the Pope removed his helmet, he asked Ryuka if this was the face he had been expecting. Ryuka studied him carefully and directly asked if the Pope was Zoe's mother. The Pope assured him that he was not, and that the face that he was wearing was not his real one. He explained that he had extracted information from the tower about the deceased and loaded it into his own body, a feat achievable by anyone with administrative rights to the tower. Ryuka questioned if this method was how the Pope had resurrected Oscar's sister and the Miraramis' daughter. The Pope confirmed this, elaborating that the towers were capable of generating human bodies. He explained the process involved taking two bodies, loading the information from when they were alive, and producing these two individuals, with only their past life information preserved. He noted that the resulting bodies were imperfect, When Ryuka asked if the Pope was using this face to deceive Zoe, the Pope acknowledged that it was indeed one way to describe it. When the Pope first met Zoe, she was going through her mother's death and had slept for 17 years. The Pope explained that he took these actions to protect her from falling into turmoil. Ryuka, however, accused the Pope of exploiting Zoe for his own battles. The Pope argued that using Zoe was necessary to fight against the Garland. To Ryuka's surprise, the Pope did admit that he did care for Zoe. With a smirk, the Pope added that the mother who didn't love her child wasn't much of a mother, but he was just joking. Ryuka, furious, demanded to know if the Pope only valued Zoe for her strength and if he had rescued the Ramess just for his own benefit. He told the Pope that his motives were selfish and that he shouldn't pretend he was acting for their benefit. Ryuka expressed his dislike for people who pretended to be kind. The Pope asked Ryuka what he wanted him to do. Ryuka requested that once they had defeated the Garland, Zoe should be allowed to leave and no longer be a soldier under the Pope's command. The Pope agreed but added that Zoe's decision would ultimately determine her path. He warned that if Zoe chose not to fight for him, she would not be able to see him anymore. The Pope questioned whether Zoe would accept being separated from her mother. Ryuka believed that as Zoe grew older, she would understand that the Pope was using her and eventually would move on. The Pope asked if this would be a happy ending for Zoe, to which Ryuka agreed. The Pope, still with a hint of sarcasm, reacted to Ryuka's revelation, but Ryuka warned him not to mess with him. He admitted he wasn't sure how he felt about Zoe, but he was certain that she would be happier with someone who genuinely cared for her rather than just using her. That was why he intended to take Zoe away from him. Ryuka told the Pope to remember his promise and walked away. The Pope, watching Ryuka leave, smiled and gently stroked Zoe's hair, reflecting on how fond he had become of her. The next day, as the Ramess prepared to leave, he bade everyone farewell and expressed how much he had enjoyed his time with them. Ryuka agreed and Zahid thanked him as well. The Ramess mentioned he would like to attend the ceremony the following day, but he couldn't afford to be late for his ship. Ryuka was puzzled by this, and the Ramess asked if they hadn't heard the announcement about the existence of the Rami to the public. Ryuka showed little interest and asked about the Mirror Ramess' daughter. The Ramess said he had occasionally looked after her during the Mirror's prime, and that she was fond of him, though she was currently feeling down. Ryuka felt a bit of sadness but was praised by the Ramess for his remarkable talent as both a Ramess and an army general. The Ramess noted that while the Mirror had similar potential to change the world, her fate was a stark reminder of what could go wrong. He advised Ryuka to use his talents wisely and bid them farewell as he climbed into his carriage. After the Ramess departed, Ryuka called Zoe over and reminded her of their conversation from the previous day. He encouraged her to pursue her dreams despite any doubts others might cast on her abilities. Zoe admitted that she was a bit scared, fearing that if she tried and failed, it would confirm her doubts about her suitability. She mentioned that she felt confident in her current role, so the fear wasn't about her current work. As they spoke, Miura approached and asked if Ryuka was free to visit the old town soon. Ryuka declined the offer, citing trumpet practice as his reason for not being available. As Ryuka walked towards the castle, he spotted Demi waiting for him. She told him that the Pope had summoned them all to discuss an issue regarding the ceremony scheduled for the next day. After that, they went inside the castle. The Pope informed them that there were reports of Empire soldiers being present in Terami. He warned that these soldiers might use the ceremony as a chance to assassinate either him or Ryuka. Ryuka was puzzled as to why his name was mentioned. The Pope explained that after Ryuka and Zoe defeated the Mirror Ramess, they'd gained significant recognition, making Ryuka a target for the Empire. The Pope continued, saying that there would be around 1,000 people at the ceremony and the Empire soldiers would likely be hidden among them. He mentioned that the faces of these soldiers were almost identical, which would help Demi identify them. Zahid asked why their faces were so similar. The Pope explained that many of the Empire soldiers were created by a single Ramess known as the Facsimile Ramess, who had the ability to make copies of himself. This Ramess had allowed the Empire to amass a large number of soldiers, even though they were on an island. As they discussed the plan, Kura suddenly appeared and announced her return, leaving everyone slightly puzzled. The Pope then outlined the strategy. Demi would identify the Empire soldiers, Ryuka would use his light to highlight them, and their disguised soldiers would eliminate the threats among the civilians. He asked if anyone had questions. Ryuka raised his hand, wondering if he could play his bugle from a distance, as he was unsure how the ceremony would unfold. The Pope thanked Ryuka for bringing it up and informed him that he would be on the main stage during the ceremony. He explained that Ryuka's music would be a key part of showcasing the world and the supernatural existence of the Rami. Ryuka was confused by this, and the Pope clarified that he wanted Ryuka's performance to be prominently displayed before the citizens. Meanwhile, the facsimile Ramus reported that everything was proceeding according to their plan, though some soldiers had been captured in the city. He told the cloaked man standing before him that the bugle sound would signal their actions. The cloaked man, however, expressed indifference, stating that despite how things appeared, they knew he was there. He told the Ramus that his role was to create a distraction while he took care of the assassination. As he began to leave, a soldier approached and requested to see his face. The cloaked man explained that due to the important event the next day, the entire city would be on high alert, so he needed to verify his identity. The man in the cloak removed his hood, revealing himself as Ramus. However, before the soldier could react, the cloaked man killed him. The next day at the ceremony, Ryuka scanned the crowd and saw it was packed with people. The Pope asked Demi if she had managed to locate the Empire soldiers. Demi confirmed that she had pinpointed those who had reached the main stage. The Pope instructed her to share her vision with him once the performance began, and told Ryuka to direct his light towards specific individuals only. Ryuka agreed, saying he only wanted their soldiers to see the lights and identify the Empire's operatives. The Pope added that the audience only needed to hear the beautiful timbre of his performance. As he spoke, the Ramus passed close to Ryuka, thinking he would deal with him when the music started. Earlier, Ryuka had been with the other Rami. Mira asked if he was nervous about performing in front of such a huge audience. Ryuka wondered why he would be, since it wasn't his first time playing. Mira noted that it was different from the battlefield, but Ryuka admitted that today was his first concert. As he prepared to perform, he felt a wave of nervousness, remembering how people had laughed at him at the past and criticized his playing. But now, after so much time in practice, he was ready. As he began to blow the bugle, a beautiful display of light filled the surroundings, mesmerizing everyone. Demi successfully identified the enemy Ramus, and Zahid and Oscar managed to capture both of them safely. Zoe, too, was awestruck by Ryuka's performance. After the performance, Ryuka stood alone on the castle grounds. Zahid and Oscar approached, praising the audience's positive reaction and the many compliments that Ryuka had received. Despite their enthusiasm, Ryuka didn't show any sign of happiness. The next day, Luca woke up early because the Pope had told him they would be leaving early. He blew the horn, and shortly after, a boy walked up to him. Still feeling sleepy, Luca looked at him. The boy introduced himself as Udo and said they'd be working together for a while. Udo asked if he was Luca the Bugler, and Luca confirmed it. Udo thought to himself, so this is the kid who defeated the mirror. He then asked Luca if he had ever thought about families of the soldiers who were left behind when they were killed under his command. Luca bluntly replied that he hadn't because he really didn't care. Curious, Luca asked why he was asking such a question. Udo used his finger to transmit something into Luca's mind using magic and then said, "How could I trust you as my general if that's how you think?" After that, they had a meeting where the Pope introduced Udo and announced that he would be joining them during their visit to the duchy. The Pope explained that Udo had the power to control blood and used to be the captain of a well-known mercenary band. Udo added that since his daughter was born, he had started prioritizing fatherhood, and now he was taking on one final well-paying mission before starting a new chapter in life. The Pope then said that since everyone was gathered, he would explain his plan. He reminded them that their mission was to eliminate Garland and informed them that the Garland was currently preparing for his next attack. The current location was the Duchy of Normandy, known as the Land of the Slaves. The state of Normandy had been destroyed by the Garland, and it was also Mira's homeland. The Pope further explained that they would be traveling by wagons, and this time, they wouldn't have soldiers accompanying them. Mira, concerned, asked if it was really safe for just a few of them to travel, since the Empire soldiers were everywhere in the duchy. The Pope explained that their small numbers were intentional, as their main goal was to sneak into the country without drawing attention, avoiding direct conflict. They also needed to conserve their soldiers for the upcoming confrontation with the Garland. He further mentioned that he would not be joining them, as he had other matters to attend to. Oscar and Zahid would stay behind with him, so the 7 of them, including Udo, who would lead the expedition, were the ones going. The Pope said he would provide more details of the plan later. He pointed to an area on the map, explaining that it was outside the diocese's influence, meaning that their powers would be nullified there. The area was also patrolled by the Empire soldiers, so it would be dangerous. He warned that the Empire had set up gateways along the duchy's borders, and though he was working to secure their safe route, he couldn't guarantee their safety. Finally, he prayed for their well-being and reassured them that the tower would always watch over them. After discussing the plan, they finally sat in the wagon to set it into motion. During the journey, Udo asked if they wanted to see a portrait of his daughter, and then asked if they thought she was cute. Kura confirmed that she was, while Poppy and Demi were busy with their own tasks. Udo then told Kura she was cute too, but not as cute as his daughter, to which she thanked him. As he was about to ask if she'd like to go with him after their mission was done, Kura interrupted, asking what had happened to his nose. Udo explained that it had been long ago during a challenge with the mirror Ramus, but then asked if he still looked manly without it. Kura apologized, saying she wasn't great at judging appearances, and added that she was more attracted to someone who could kill people and make it entertaining. Hearing her response, Udo thought to himself that he wouldn't be talking to her again. Udo then turned to Demi and asked why she didn't take a look at his daughter's portrait. She bluntly replied that she didn't care about it, while Poppy added that she didn't like children. Frustrated, Udo stepped out of the wagon and told Mira and Luca that the women inside were all messed up. Luca defended Zoe, telling him not to lump her in with the others. Udo asked if she was the one who charged at the mirror Ramus, then commented that she wasn't into women stronger than him, saying it was better than being with a weakling. Annoyed, Luca snapped back, saying it would have been better if there was one less horny loser around. Udo reminded him that the Pope had ordered him to abandon the command once they reached the duchy, and as a professional, he fully intended to do so. He added that as a father, he didn't plan on dying. He couldn't leave his wife a widow or his daughter without a father. He emphasized that he needed a commander who was responsible enough to send death gratuities to the families of fallen soldiers. This comment struck a nerve with Luca, as it reminded him of Udo's earlier question that morning. Udo then warned him that if he found out that Luca and his group had no idea what they were doing, he would abandon them without hesitation and never look back. Meanwhile, Mira told Luca that he suddenly sensed something. They looked around and Udo informed them that they had exited the diocese's range, meaning that they were now just like ordinary people with no special powers. He urged them to give it their all, calling Luca the little captain. As the sun began to set, night fell, and Luca and Zoe were sleeping together. Meanwhile, Udo was trying to talk with Demi, who looked completely annoyed by him. The next day, Udo showed them the gateway and said that beyond it lay the land of slaves. He explained that once they entered, their powers would return. However, if they got too close, the guards would surely rain arrows on them, so they couldn't just rush in. Luca asked if they were going to take the long way around, and Udo agreed. He said they would climb the valley. Although they couldn't assume the Empire wasn't watching the valley tops, Udo mentioned that they were on good terms with the person in charge of a nearby farm. This person would guide them through safely. Udo also knew about the Empire soldiers, so he could reveal the patrol routes and timings. Their first stop was the farm. While hidden among the trees, Udo looked at the farmer's house and told the crew he had already warned the farmer in advance. He said that if something went wrong, the farmer would use a bird-shaped wind vane as a signal. They noticed the wind vane was clearly there, and there were footprints from the Empire soldiers leading back to where they came from. There were also hidden soldiers in the forest watching them, while Luca's crew was still trying to figure out what was going on. After piecing everything together, Udo concluded that the Empire soldiers already knew they were coming today. Hearing this, Luca asked if the farmer had betrayed them. Udo agreed, saying either the farmer had given them up or was forced to reveal their plan. Kura asked Demi why she hadn't already found the soldiers. Demi angrily reminded her that none of them could use their powers. Udo ordered them to stay quiet, looked around and suggested that the soldiers might be hiding inside the house since they hadn't attacked yet. He added that he was strong enough to take down a few soldiers without powers, but they'd be doomed if reinforcements arrived. Udo then turned to Luca and asked him to make a decision. Should they return to the wagon and escape or advance? Either way, they needed a plan, and it was Luca's call to make. However, before making a decision, Luca asked Udo to explain his Ramus power. Meanwhile, the hidden soldiers thought they had perfectly trapped the Rami as they watched them head toward the farmhouse. They were confident that the Rami wouldn't stand a chance outside the tower. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a dead soldier's body was thrown out, killed by Udo. The farmhouse was set on fire. The soldiers were shocked as the cattle started stampeding toward them. Luca explained that he had released the cattle and tied them to as many wagons as he could. As they rode away on horses, he asked Poppy if she could control the animals. Poppy, thinking about how much mutton was going to waste, shot an arrow to steer the cattle, causing further chaos. The soldiers were shocked by the number of cattle around them and knew that the Rami were hiding among them. The Empire soldiers started firing arrows at them, and Luca told everyone to use the wagons as shields. The commander of the soldiers ordered them to aim for the horses pulling the wagons. When the horses were hit, the wagons stopped, and the Rami were exposed to the soldiers' view. Suddenly, an arrow flew towards Zoe, who was sitting behind Luca. Without thinking, Luca shielded her with his arm, and the arrow pierced through it, leaving him badly injured. Despite the pain, Udo urged him to keep holding the reins as they were close to their destination. The enemy commander instructed his soldiers not to let up, confident that the Rami wouldn't be able to cross the moat. But to the commander's shock, Udo and his horse leaped over the moat. The commander mocked them, calling them pathetic. However, moments later, Udo emerged from the battle, standing on top of the moat, covered in blood, but grinning. "The only time I'm pathetic," Udo said with a smirk, "is when I'm making sweet love to my wife." Meanwhile, before, when Luca asked Udo about his power, he asked him if he could lift people using his power. Luca, having already noticed the moat, asked if Udo could use his power to help them escape over the moat. Udo said he couldn't because there wasn't enough blood to save everyone, but Luca suggested using the blood from the cattle nearby. Following their plan, Udo used his power to lift them up, creating a bubble of blood that carried them over to the Empire's kingdom border. Once they were on the other side, Luca asked if he could leave the rest to Udo. Udo, recognizing that Luca might be young but wasn't foolish, agreed to handle the situation. As enemy soldiers shot arrows at them, Udo used his blood shield to block the arrows and shot them back, killing the attackers. With his blood bags, Udo charged in and began slicing through the soldiers, using their blood to create more blood bags. He was much stronger than they had anticipated. Kura called out to leave some soldiers half alive so she could tend to Luca's wound. After defeating the Empire's soldiers, they took over their position and decided to spend the night there. That evening, Lucas spoke with the Pope through a mirror. He reported that they had faced some challenges but had successfully entered the diocese. The Pope praised them for their efforts and mentioned that he was glad Luca was using the mirror. The Pope explained that the mirror was given to him before they left for the wagons. It was imbued with the power of the mirror Ramus but had some limitations. The mirror could open a portal, but only 5 times before it would break. Additionally, it could only open portals to locations he had previously visited. Luca asked if he could use the mirror to go to Garland, and the Pope confirmed that he could not. He advised Luca to use the mirror only for communication or within the scope of their planned operations. While Luca was talking to the Pope, Udo overheard the conversation. He heard Luca asking if someone from their group were in serious danger, could they be sent back to the Pope using the mirror. The Pope said he would allow it because keeping as many of them alive as possible was important in the long run. However, he warned Luca to make sure he used the mirror wisely for their plan before ending the call. Suddenly, Miura approached Udo and said that Luca was a good captain, even though he could be a bit cheeky at times. Miura recalled the first meeting when Luca was only interested in being a musician. Over time, Luca realized that there were more important things than just his dream. Miura was confident that Luca cared about all of them. Udo smiled and replied that simply caring wasn't enough. He pointed out that Luca had sacrificed the lives of soldiers to win but didn't care about them at all. Udo explained that Luca cared about the people he knew, but didn't care about those he didn't know. Miura agreed that it was impossible to care about everyone on the battlefield. Udo said that if Luca had at least some self-awareness, it would be fine. Instead, he was only emotional about his own people. Udo admitted that while Luca wasn't a good captain, he was definitely a good kid. He then asked Miura if Luca was in love with Zoe. Miura said that Luca liked her, but no one knew more than that. In the wagon, Udo reminded everyone that it was time to review their plan. The Pope had instructed them to locate the Garland and the Facsimile Ramus once they entered the duchy. Luca asked if they couldn't just find him using Demi's vision, but Demi replied that they were nowhere to be seen. The Pope explained that the Garland were probably using their Ramus power to hide, similar to how they used the Mirror Ramus power to stay concealed. He added that the Garland was also moving while hiding, so they would have to search their hideouts one by one. The Pope mentioned there were 4 possible locations where the Garland might be hiding. He wanted them to search these locations upon reaching the duchy. Udo said that they had made it so far without any major issues, but the real danger was about to begin. He explained that not only the Empire's Rami, but also many soldiers were eager to prove themselves. He warned that the area was filled with chaos and confusion, so it was best to avoid confrontations whenever possible. Looking out the window, he announced that they had finally arrived in the land of slaves. A week later, in a tent, a soldier bowed before Aramis and urged him to join the battle, as the Empire's forces were overwhelming. This Ramus replied that they hadn't sent any of their own Rami to the fight, so he saw no reason to waste his powers on such weak opponents. Despite his reluctance, the soldier continued to insist, and eventually, this Ramus agreed to go. As the Rammus entered the battlefield calmly, he found a tree to sit on and began using his powers to trap the soldiers in the branches he created. He felt bored by the easy kills and wondered if the Mirror Rammus was truly dead. Suddenly, a man and a child appeared in front of him. The man, dressed in a soldier's outfit, wondered if he was in love with the Mirror Rammus, while the child beside him called the idea of love disgusting. The Rammus, confused, asked who they were. Before he could react, the man rushed at him and pierced his hand through the Rammus' chest. Shocked, the Rammus fell to the ground. As the man and child removed their masks, the Rammus noticed the child's appearance and wondered if she was the Garland, especially since she had flowers around her. He also questioned if the man was her father or just an ordinary person, as he had no branches or special powers. The girl asked the man to kill the Rammus because she couldn't stand seeing him in such a state. However, the man suggested they make use of him instead. They took the Rammus to a different location and tied his hands. The girl held a knife and the man instructed her to kill the Rammus herself. Although she didn't want to, the man insisted, saying she would understand and enjoy it more once she grew up. Reluctantly, she used the knife to kill the Rammus. His blood spilled everywhere and she ended up covered in it, which she found very disgusting. The man, impressed, commented that she managed to cut him off on her own and asked if she found it fun. She said there was nothing fun about it and asked him not to make her do it again. Annoyed, she made it clear that she didn't want to be involved in such things. Despite her reaction, the man congratulated her, noting it was her first time killing someone like that. At that moment, another man appeared. He had a single branch on his head and was clearly irritated. He asked what they were doing, as he had specifically told them not to wander around. The girl angrily told him to shut his mouth and called him a grumpy old man. The man responded calmly, telling her not to take her frustration out on him and suggested they go somewhere more enjoyable. She smiled and agreed. As they left, she glanced back at the dead Rammus and his severed head. Despite her initial disgust, she thought that maybe it was a bit fun after all. The man then told the little girl, his daughter, that he was leaving. Hearing this, the girl felt a bit sad and asked if he was going to take care of the people in his way and how long he would be gone. He replied that it would be about a month, but he would return before she could finish charging her strike. Placing his hand on her head, he assured her that there was no safer place than by his side, but he believed that this place was a close second. As he walked towards the door, he said goodbye as she waved back at him. After he left, the girl sat on her throne and closed her eyes. Bored, she ordered the two slaves nearby to tell her a story to entertain her. On the other side, Udo was explaining to the crew about the land of slaves, revealing that its real name was the Duchy of Normandy. He explained that 20 years ago it used to be a vassal state of Gallia. However, one day they suddenly started exporting large numbers of slaves, and all those slaves looked exactly the same. Hearing this, Poppy screamed in fear, and Luca asked if they were created by the facsimile Rammus. Udo confirmed this and explained that the third child of the Duke of Normandy, the facsimile Rammus, used his power to fuel the country's slave trade. Luca then asked if the Rammus was originally from the duchy and whether he was the one creating soldiers for the empire. Udo confirmed it, adding that the Garland's attack took away his country and family, yet his loyalty still remained with the empire. Udo speculated that maybe the Rammus was threatened. Suddenly, Demi entered and informed them that they had reached the first location. She stood on a hill in front of them and prepared to go over their mission again, using her power to illustrate the plan. While Demi was using her power, Udo reminded the crew that their mission was to eliminate the Garland, who was hiding somewhere in the country, preparing to attack. Demi mentioned that she couldn't detect anything, and Udo explained that due to the power of the mystery Rammus, the Garland was likely hidden, and they had no choice but to search and destroy 4 key locations. Udo then shared a memory about the mystery Rammus, saying he had once served under him long ago. Back then, the mystery Rammus could hide an entire castle with his power, making it impossible to notice until you were within 20 yards of it. The castle wasn't invisible, it was just that people wouldn't be aware of its presence even if it was right in front of them. Because of this, Udo said they would need to infiltrate the area to find the Garland. He also mentioned that since they were disguised as Empire soldiers, only the men could safely do this. Luca agreed, suggesting that only he and Mura should go, while the rest of the crew stayed behind for protection. Mura, covered in sweat, seemed unsure, but Luca assured him that they would be fine. He reminded Mura that their goal was to avoid combat, and assured him that if anything went wrong, they could use the mirror to escape. Luca also expressed his desire to protect Zoe, not wanting to use her power, which was why Udo needed to stay with the crew to protect them. Zoe, concerned, called Luca a weak baby, which embarrassed him, but Udo reassured them that they would be watching over Luca and Miura using Demi's vision. He added that they hoped the two would return safely, especially if they encountered the Garland. After that, Luca and Miura dressed in soldier's armor to hide their identities, and Udo wished them good luck as they prepared to head out. In the next scene, the facsimile Ramus was creating new bodies. One of the newly created bodies immediately understood that he was a copy of Theodore, the facsimile Ramus. He remembered everything from the memories that had been passed on to him. As they were born, their heads were shaved and marked, and the number of cuts on their heads indicated their rank. However, none of it really hurt because they were designed to endure pain. Most of these facsimiles became soldiers, while others worked on farms or as blacksmiths. There was also a physical exam that determined their roles or fate. Even though they were all facsimiles, they still had slight differences in character and ability. If any of them couldn't perform their assigned duties, they were thrown into prison and used for ritualistic purposes. After enduring certain processes, they were sent off to their respective assignments. On sunny days, their duties as soldiers began. While talking with Luca, the facsimile shared this information. Then Luca asked him for his name, to which the facsimile replied 4697635. Luca responded that his own name was 1234567 and asked why the facsimile had chosen to become a soldier. This question made the facsimile pause and question himself. Before he could answer, Miura appeared and told him not to think too much about it. They quickly ran off together, but the facsimile was still left wondering about the question. After running a while, they finally arrived at the castle. It was massive, and Luca realized they would need to search every corner. He suggested they split up. Luca would head west while Miura would search east. As Luca walked through the castle, he observed the various activities happening, but found nothing suspicious. Exhausted from wandering around, they eventually left the castle and sat on a bench outside. Sitting there, Luca recalled Udo's words, that if they noticed something, they would find it. He began to wonder if the Garland wasn't in the castle after all. Just then, a soldier approached and informed him that a prayer was about to begin in the garden, inviting him to join. Luca followed him to the garden and was shocked by what he saw. Inside the prison, there were numerous facsimiles, all naked. Both Luca and Miura were horrified and confused by the sight. Moments later, a soldier set the prison on fire. They watched in disbelief as the soldiers around them prayed while the prison burned. Earlier, while they were in the wagon, Luca asked Udo why he had chosen to side with the Papal State instead of joining the Empire. Udo responded that he would rather see the Papal State rule the world than the Empire. Luca was surprised by this and asked for an explanation. Udo explained that the Papal State worshipped the tower, whereas in the Empire, they worshipped the trees inside the towers. He went on to describe a disturbing culture in the Empire, where live human sacrifices were part of the rituals. People were set on fire as offerings, with the prayers sent to the trees, and those chosen for sacrifice were seen as inferior, either physically or mentally. Udo mentioned that this ritual was performed in nearly all territories of the Empire. Though he admitted that the Papal State was far from perfect, he said he wouldn't want his daughter to live in a world ruled by the Empire. Luca finally understood Udo's reasoning after witnessing the horrifying scene firsthand. The bodies inside the prison were set on fire, and flames consumed them as they burned. Miura, overwhelmed by the sight, felt sick and looked like he was about to vomit. Concerned, Luca glanced at him, wondering if he was okay. Amid the chaos, one of the facsimiles in the prison noticed them. Afterward, during lunch break, Miura and Luca went to the dining hall. As they sat at the table, both looked downcast, concluding that the Garland and the facsimile Ramus weren't there since they hadn't found any clues about them. Miura seemed particularly uneasy, so Luca asked if he was okay. Miura admitted that the ritual had really affected him. Luca then asked if he hadn't felt the same when he saw the aftermath of the Garland's attack on his homeland. Miura agreed. Suddenly, a facsimile approached and asked if he could sit with him. Miura, unsure, allowed him to sit. Both of them looked confused as the facsimile bluntly said, "You must be Miura." Miura immediately pulled out a knife, pressed it to the facsimile's neck, and angrily demanded to know how he knew his name. The facsimile calmly assured him that he wasn't trying to cause a scene. He explained that the facsimile Ramus had been looking for Miura because he was interested in someone like him. Luca asked why the facsimile had approached them instead of attacking. The facsimile admitted that he wouldn't win in a fight against them, so he prepared to make a deal. He offered help to capture them alive, collect his reward, and then help them escape afterward. However, if they refused, he warned he'd make a scene. He demanded an answer before the lunch break ended. Muir asked the facsimile why Theodore had joined forces with the Empire, betraying his own homeland. The facsimile explained that he felt like he never truly belonged there. From the memories he had inherited since birth, he recalled being treated harshly because he looked different from ordinary people. His brothers were the first to take out their anger and frustration on him, but once his powers developed, he was forced to create facsimiles constantly. At first, just strands of his hair were enough to produce the facsimiles, but once he became bald, they began taking other parts of his body to continue creating them. Despite this horrific treatment, the facsimile Ramus remained timid and couldn't stand up to his father. That's why he eventually accepted the Empire's invitation. The facsimile Ramus further revealed that the Garland's attack wasn't a punishment, but rather a form of salvation for him. The Empire had simply become his new master. Mira was shocked by what he had heard and asked the facsimile if he could really accept what the Garland had done. The facsimile smirked and asked if Mira didn't believe him, saying he had expected some sympathy from him. He pointed out that Mira had gone through something similar because of the branch on his head. He suggested that Mira must have felt out of place too, discriminated against by his fellow villagers. The facsimile Ramus then added that it must have been satisfying for Mira when he saw the village was destroyed and all those people who had forsaken him were finally dead. He even mentioned that Mira was probably relieved not to have cared for his mother anymore. Hearing this, Mira apologized to Luca and without hesitation sliced the facsimile's neck. As people around them stared in shock, Mira and Luca quickly ran to a nearby closed room to escape. Inside the room, Mira apologized but explained that he couldn't hold back any longer. Luca said it was okay since he was going to refuse the facsimile's offer anyway. He suggested they use the mirror to escape, but Mira proposed another plan. He offered to be the bait, drawing the facsimile's attention away so Luca could find a way to escape. Mira said they couldn't afford to waste the mirror. Luca reluctantly agreed, noting that Mira would hurt himself if he ran at full speed. Mira smiled and assured Luca he was prepared and could use his speed safely. Mira then started running, and the facsimiles began to follow him. As he crossed the bridge, he noticed that the facsimiles were also in front of him. With no other option, he decided to jump off the bridge. To his shock, the facsimiles followed him, jumping one after another. The area below was quickly filled with facsimiles. Mira wondered why they weren't afraid of dying, as they jumped from such heights without hesitation. While all this was happening, Luca managed to get through. Udo handed him the trumpet and Luca thanked him. Mira, lost in the chaos, suddenly saw a ray of light and followed it. He picked up a sword from a soldier and began slicing necks as he ran. As he cut through the facsimiles, he noticed he felt calmer than before and was more aware of his surroundings. Mira remembered his mother telling him she wanted him to leave the village when she died. She had even offered to let him leave right away if he wanted to. At the time, Mira had asked her if the sickness had affected her mind, questioning why she was saying that. She told him he didn't belong there and advised him to find a place where he could fit in. After running for a while, Mira finally emerged from the chaos and saw his crew waiting for him. Lucas smiled and remarked that they had both made it out alive. After they both reached safety, they sat in the wagon and started moving away. Udo mentioned that they couldn't find the Garland or the facsimile Ramus, and their success would depend on the luck at the next base. He praised both of them for their good work before leaving. Mira apologized to Luca again, saying they nearly got caught because of him. Luca told him to stop apologizing so much as he had already said it many times. Then Luca asked if Mira planned to go back home once they killed the Garland, knowing that would mean that they were free. Mira smiled and said he would stay where he was, as he felt he belonged there at the moment. On the other hand, the girl asked the facsimile Ramus if he was the world's biggest coward and liked being alone. Theodore admitted that he was. He said that even if she asked him to tell her a story, she couldn't. She questioned why he liked being alone, considering she always saw him with his facsimiles. He explained that it was because they were all parts of himself. He didn't care about creating more soldiers, he just wanted to live in a place with only his facsimiles. The girl then offered to create a place for him where he could be with his facsimiles and no one else. She said that once this war was over, she would destroy some useless country and ask the emperor to make that happen. Theodore was shocked and asked why she would do that for him. She smiled and said it was because she felt like it. Since all the facsimiles had the same face, she found it disgusting and would be happy if they were gone. However, she asked Theodore to work hard for them in return. She mentioned that her father was busy and needed help. Theodore wondered what kind of help was needed. She told him her father was traveling around the country to eliminate Rami that had come into the country. She mentioned that one was called the Time Weave Ramis and another the Starlight Ramis. Zoe was dreaming while she slept. In the dream, she was with a Pope who had shapeshifted into her mother. Her mother told her that the world was full of frightening things, which was why she couldn't leave her side and had never left her room. But when she finally did leave her room, she found herself in an even worse place. During this time, Demi, Udo, and Mura were searching for the 4 places where the garland might be hiding. The second location, Kuglov's fortress, they noticed the fortress seemed to be hosting a guest. Udo asked Demi if she could sense the garland there, but she shook her head. Mura mentioned that they might be using some kind of power to hide themselves. He then asked if they planned to sneak in like before, but Udo said it was too dangerous as they were in the middle of a battle. He explained that they had drawn too much attention at the last location, and if they weren't careful, their pursuers might catch them. Udo added that he would talk to Luca later, but for now, they should keep observing the fortress for a few more days. If they still couldn't find the garland, they would move on to the next location. Kura asked if they were going to stay in their small room all the time, since Empire soldiers were outside. Udo confirmed they would, and Miura wondered if it was safe for Luca and the others to be outside at that moment. Demi assured him that it would be fine if they were just going out to buy food. While they were buying food, Poppy pointed out that even though the place was under the Empire's watch, life seemed pretty normal. She had heard that the garland destroyed their country, so she expected it to be barren. Luca explained that Udo had mentioned the garland's meteor split into fragments as it fell, which is why the cities between the impact sites managed to avoid much damage. As they walked through the market, Luca brought up a conversation he had with Mura. Mura had mentioned that once they defeated the garland, they would finally be free. Luca then asked Zoe if there was anywhere she wanted to visit after that. Zoe seemed confused, so he clarified, asking if she wanted to see somewhere outside the tower's radius, outside the diocese, or even beyond the reach of the Rami. Zoe thought for a moment and smiled, saying she was happy as long as she was with Luca and her mother. Luca felt a bit sad hearing that. He remembered the Pope's words when he asked if Zoe would ever want to leave her mother's side. Luca thought to himself that Zoe wouldn't stay a child forever. But what if she continued to rely on her mother? As Luca was lost in thought, he suddenly noticed a long line forming in front of a tree. Curious, he asked a nearby woman what was happening. She asked if they were outsiders, and when Luca confirmed it, she explained that someone from the Empire was conducting medical examinations to check people's genes. Luca was confused and asked what she meant. The woman clarified that this person had an ability to detect any genetic abnormalities. Luca was shocked and asked if a doctor could really do that. She shook her head and said the person wasn't a doctor. She pointed to the tree and explained that it was watching them. The people were told that abnormalities needed to be removed, so the Empire was caging those who were deemed abnormal because they were causing trouble in town. The woman then reassured Luca, saying that as long as they were normal like the decent people, there was nothing to worry about. Seeing the situation, a thought crossed Poppy's mind. If they got caught, they might be executed. Acting quickly, she shot an arrow into the air, which struck the cage. Luca, shocked and angry, asked her what she was doing. The soldiers noticed the arrow and turned their attention towards them. Suddenly, a man appeared behind them. He had seen the arrow's path and realized it was shot by Poppy, identifying them as the Papal State's Rami. He hadn't expected to run into them during his first mission, but kept his thoughts to himself. Poppy, ready for a fight, asked if he wanted to challenge them and urged Zoe to prepare, but the man calmly responded that he didn't want to fight, saying it wouldn't be wise to battle in that place. Instead, he suggested they form a temporary truce. Afterward, the man accompanied them to their hideout and explained that they wanted to talk to the Papal State. Demi, confused, asked what was going on, but Lucas said he would explain later. Poppy, feeling guilty, quietly said it wasn't her fault, though Luca thought to himself that it definitely was. There was another man with the first one, and both were Rami. Udo looked at the man and asked if he had been the one fighting at the fortress earlier, and if it was really okay for him to be there. The man replied that the fight was at a stalemate, so there was no harm in meeting them. He then said that they wanted to talk about his former partner, the Ramus who could change the weight of things, and asked what had happened to him. Luca glanced at Mira, wondering if he remembered that Ramus had been imprisoned at the bottom of the tower. Demi spoke up, saying they weren't sure exactly what happened, but they only knew he had been taken. Udo then asked the men what they wanted. The man pointed at Zoe and Luca, saying that they were after these two Ramis. He offered a deal. If they handed them over, the Empire wouldn't harm any other Ramis as long as they didn't oppose the Empire. Hearing this, Luca asked why they wanted them. The man explained that the Empire was planning to lead an attack on the continent, wiping out all the Rami in each region, and these two, Luca and Zoe, were their targets. After the battle with the Mirror Country, their statuses had been raised to sapling candidates. Luca, confused, asked what a sapling was, but the man admitted that they didn't know either. He only knew it was something valuable to the Empire, which is why the official order was to capture them alive. Udo stood there thinking it made sense for them to want Zoe, but he couldn't understand why they wanted Luca, who could only see sound. Meanwhile, Poppy whispered to Demi that it seemed like a good deal. If they handed over Luca and Zoe, 5 of them would be safe, but Demi told her to shut up. Mira firmly said that there was no way they could accept that offer. He added that he didn't trust a single word from the Empire. The man replied they were free to leave for now, but asked if they really thought they could escape the Empire forever. He looked at Luca and said he wasn't just talking about the present, because even after they defeat the Garland, a war between the Papal State and the Empire is inevitable. The conflict would continue, and they would be hunted for the rest of their lives. Luca responded that if that were true, they could always escape to a place where the Empire could never find them. He then revealed that they had a contract allowing them to leave the Papal State after defeating the Garland. Udo, hearing this, looked at him and said they couldn't survive outside the tower's radius. Luca was confused, asking why they couldn't. Udo suddenly realized the Pope had deceived them. He explained that the Rami's powers come from the tower, and the same goes for the energy that keeps them alive. Even if they ate regular food, they wouldn't get the necessary energy. Udo told them they could only survive for about a month outside the tower's range. After that, without the tower's energy, they would starve to death and eventually be forced to return to the tower. Luca was completely shocked when he heard the truth, wondering if it could really be right. Demi looked a bit sad too. The man from the Empire explained that this was why they had nowhere to run, and it would be better for them to surrender peacefully. Otherwise, both sides would have to go through a pointless struggle. Luca then said that to achieve his dreams, they would need to completely destroy the Empire. The man replied that he expected that response, and Cora wondered aloud if they should just get up and fight already. Suddenly, without warning, they all started running away, leaving Zoe behind. Miura asked Luca if it was okay to leave Zoe there, but Luca reassured him, saying she would handle the man and the other enemies wouldn't be able to touch her. Inside the room, it was just Zoe and the man. Luca knew that to protect Zoe's powers, they needed to avoid fighting and focus on escaping. That was their only way to win, so they kept running tirelessly trying to get out of the area. As they ran, another Ramis appeared in front of them. He told them he didn't want to involve the citizens in their fight and asked them not to go too far. Seeing this Ramis, Luca and his team quickly changed direction. Miura asked Luca if the man really broke the ceiling with his fist, and Luca wondered if the branch he carried gave them super strength. Demi shook her head and said her branch wasn't even reacting. She explained that it was probably because the man was close to flowering. She revealed that when a Ramis is near the flowering stage, their bodies sometimes become stronger to handle their growing abilities. They moved through the crowd in the market, and suddenly Udo spotted the Ramis they'd been looking for. He aimed at the Ramis' head with his blood bullet, but the Ramis dodged it and quickly kicked Udo. The Ramis said he knew Udo was a blood Ramis and could use more blood by killing civilians. But even so, he seemed pretty calm. Udo was revealed that the Ramis didn't know that he got weaker when he was low on blood. Poppy shot an arrow at the Ramis, but he dodged it as it brushed against his hair. Demi noticed that the arrow slowed down the moment it touched his hair, realizing that anything that came into contact with him slowed down. Demi understood that both Udo and Poppy's attacks were useless because whenever they tried to strike him, their attacks were slowed by his ability. Miura pointed out that their attacks weren't working and wondered if there was any way to hurt him. He asked Luca what they should do next. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Ramis with Zoe was silently watching her, while Zoe was looking at Luca and his group running through the market. The man knew Zoe's weakness. She would fall asleep after using her powers, so he planned to let Luca and the others escape first and then stop Zoe before she could use her abilities to take her down. Zoe stood there, thinking about how Luca had told her they needed to save her powers. But he also said she should use them for self-defense and always think about her own safety. She wanted to help Luca, but fighting scared her. So when she looked at the man's face, she pictured it as a potato. It still felt a bit scary for her to make decisions on her own. It was easier when her mom or Luca told her what to do. Then she remembered the sound waves from the horn when Luca played it in front of the people, like a show, and found a bit of comfort in that memory. Meanwhile, Miura was holding Luca's hand as they ran through the town, unstoppable. Since their usual attacks weren't working, they had planned something different. But while they were running, Luca's hand suddenly slipped from Miura's grip and he fell. At that moment, the Rammus came charging at him with a sword, ready to strike. Just as the sword was about to pierce Luca, Korra jumped in and grabbed the Rammus's hand and let the sword pierce her instead. Using her power, she transferred the attack back into him. The Rammus was shocked, realizing that was her ability. In panic, he tried to run away. But suddenly Zoe appeared, grabbed him, and held him in place. Korra grabbed him again and asked Poppy to shoot her. Poppy fired an arrow at Korra's head, but instead of hurting her, the attack quickly transferred to the Rammus, killing him instantly. After the Rammus was dead, Udo quickly ordered everyone to run. They had to escape the town before getting caught. As they fled, the other Rammus arrived and saw his partner's lifeless body. Meanwhile, Luca and his crew dashed away. While running, Luca asked Zoe how much power she had used. She told him she hadn't used any because he said they needed to save her strength. Demi and Udo were both shocked by her answer. After running for a while, they were finally sitting inside their wagon. Udo was still thinking about why the Empire considered Zoe and Luca so special, wishing their pursuers weren't so troublesome. Meanwhile, Luca asked Demi if Zoe could also experience the flowering process, since even without using her powers, she was able to apprehend the Rammus. Demi replied that she wasn't so sure, but the Pope had told her that when a Rammus mind and spirit mature significantly, that's when the flowering occurs. She looked at Zoe and said that even though she still seemed like a child, it might happen soon once her mind matures. Luca smiled at Zoe and wondered how long it would take for her to stop relying so much on the Pope. As the sun set, they all lay down to sleep. Zoe was looking at Luca, thinking about how he wanted to protect her even though he was weaker. But she felt the same way. She wanted to protect him too. Since Luca was determined to achieve his dream, she thought she should find her own dream and fulfill her wish so she could stand beside him. Even though she was scared, she decided she would fight monsters, all while thinking about winning Luca over as soon as possible. She held his arm, moved closer to him, closed her eyes, and at that moment, her branch began to grow. Meanwhile, the father of the Garland sat on the castle wall, waiting for the papal state people to arrive. He looked bored, thinking about taking a bath, and wondered if he should start chasing them afterward. 2 months before the Papal States expedition reached the Land of Mirrors, the Garland's father visited a place called Hispania. He approached the leader of an arena, saying he had something to ask him. The arena leader, clearly annoyed, snapped back, saying he was busy and told him to wait until the match was over. Unbothered by the man's attitude, the Garland's father killed the gladiators fighting in the arena and with a smile, remarked that the match seemed to be over now. The arena leader was completely shocked, while the Garland, annoyed, commented that the fight was just getting interesting. The leader angrily asked if the Garland's father wanted to die. Soldiers surrounded them, but within seconds, the Garland's father killed all of them and tied the leader to a chair. He then sat down beside the Garland and asked her if she was still upset, telling her they had found the location of their target. He asked if she really wanted to watch the fight, to which the Garland replied, "Not really." She mentioned that the gladiators didn't have to die, surprising the man. He asked why she thought that, and she responded, "Because I didn't see the end of the fight." She seemed a bit upset, and when he asked if something was bothering her, she simply said it was nothing. After that, they left the arena. After that, they stood outside the castle. He mentioned that the Emperor had declared this castle their objective, explaining that there were 2 Rami inside who thought they were invincible and had been recruiting thugs. He also said they needed to eliminate them along with a Sky Render. She remained silent and he smiled, suggesting that after they finished the job, they should go sightseeing at the Land of Mirrors. Curious, she asked what that was. He explained that the Land of Mirrors was a place filled with mirrors connected to other locations. He asked if she found it interesting, and she nodded. With a grin, he said, "Let's finish this quickly and head there." He opened the castle door for her to enter, and they stepped inside. The soldiers looked at him in confusion, wondering who they were. The man laughed and said, "Looks like we're lost. Have you seen a monster with a branch growing from its head?" Suddenly, in an instant, he killed everyone in the room, leaving only one man barely alive. The girl calmly held his hand for a moment before letting go and walking away. As she left, she remarked that he was taking too long to die and she was getting bored. Afterward, they went upstairs to another room where he swiftly killed everyone inside. He continued moving through multiple rooms, relentlessly killing everyone he encountered, leaving no one behind. The girl arrived and saw him with 2 Ramas tied up in a room. She asked if he was finished. He explained that one of the Ramas had exceptionally tough skin, so he needed someone else's ability to finish her off. He demonstrated that the Rama's saliva could melt anything, which was why he was tied up. The girl wondered if even her ability would be too weak against such toughness and chuckled. As she observed the execution, she laughed loudly. The man, smiling, thought she didn't fully grasp the situation. He then punched the man Ramis in the chest, causing the saliva to spill onto the girl. Both Rami died instantly. The girl continued to laugh, but the man noticed her partner Ramis, Anna, sadly dying from the saliva. At the end, he was holding her hand and apologizing. Seeing his apology made the girl a bit sad. 1 month later, they were in the land of mirrors, sitting in a restaurant. The girl was watching a mother with her newborn baby. The man asked if something was on her mind, as she had seemed to enjoy exploring the land of mirrors. He wondered if she was concerned about the orders from Carl, which were to use the Garland's ability to attack the capital city of the country. She replied that she was unsure and questioned if they were really expected to destroy the entire country. The man asked why she thought that, and she said it was because the country was so enjoyable to explore and had so many people. If they used a meteor to attack, many would die. She wondered if killing people was not really bad. The man asked if she was asking him about this. He told her a story about a soldier from the past who accidentally killed a citizen of his own country. The soldier was put on trial, but the court found him innocent. He asked her to guess it, and she guessed it was because the citizen was a bad person. The man laughed and said that wasn't the reason. The real reason was that the soldier was just doing his job, which involved killing people. Similarly, as Rami, they were always on duty and were treated like soldiers, so they could kill anyone they wanted. Hearing this, the girl smiled, relieved that she had been worrying for no reason. The man said that since they were soldiers for life and couldn't quit, they should enjoy their privileges. The girl asked if it was okay to kill anyone, like the waitress, to avoid paying for the meal. The man agreed and said it was a clever idea. So when they had the chance, they killed the waitress and got their meal for free. Well, folks, the latest episode of the manga ends here, but we have a lot of interesting titles you should check out. Don't forget to click like and subscribe for more videos like these.